Welcome, everyone. It is time for the Fortnite PlayStation Cup. And, of course, I'm your host, Life with Panda. Joining me today is Oliver Bass. Bass from the past, breaking it all down for you. Now, we actually just got done with EU Zero Build competition. Incredible games. We love to see it, but it's time. It is time for NA to rise up and show that they're the bigger reason. I'm just kidding. We're getting ready to have some fun, though. Bass, how you feeling today, man? You ready?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling excited. I am honestly most excited for the fact that we finally do get to see NA. We've done a couple of these PlayStation Cups here, and we have not really been able to see NA as a result. So, now we get to see NA, because I'll tell you this much. A lot of the FNCS pros saw the EU broadcast and went, let me pick up a PlayStation, and then ended up competing. I wonder how many of the NA guys have done the same.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a few. We'll have to obviously get into the player list a little bit later and see who actually stepped up to the plate and played in this, but we got to talk about everything going on, right? Obviously, if you don't know, we're live here on twitch.tv/PlayStation, but of course, we're also live on the the PlayStation Esports YouTube, so make sure to go check that out as well. Get subscribed over there. Of course, if you want to watch live from YouTube, you can watch it right there too, but also incredible content over there. You got tips and tricks and other videos always being published on that channel for multiple game titles, so get involved, check it out. But it's time. It's all about today, so let's get into it and let's talk about the format here for the Fortnite PlayStation Cup. Now, keep in mind, this is the finals. Now, we've had two qualifiers that led up here to the event finals. This is the standard battle royale, so it's no longer zero build. This is all about who the best of the best build players are in the region. Now, it is going to be 100 players, meaning that it is solo gameplay. You'll love to see it. So we'll see how that plays out for them. But it's going to be 6 games in total played out for these solo players. Now, Bass, talk to me about the points here.
Points are going to be pretty standard, and if you guys saw the EU, it's going to be the exact same thing. 30 points for first place. After that, it's a 5-point drop-off, then a 3-point drop-off, 2-point drop-off, and well, you get the gist from there on out. It's going to be eliminations, though, that also grant you points. 2 points per elimination. But the other thing we also have to keep in mind, Panda, there's other ways to earn points here today. If you want, you can also go after the mid-match objectives. Open a vault, get 3 points, or capture the Rift Island POI. 15 points, and my goodness, did this play a hand in our EU games.
Yeah, I think this is going to play out way different, right? Because, again, in zero build, you can throw down a bunker, you can throw down a shield bubble and try to fight for it that way. But in standard BR, you can actually fully build players out of the area. So I'm curious how the fight's going to go here at the Rift Loot Island. But remember, this Rift Island, when it pops up, it is a big deal. 15 points is no easy task. That's half of a win right there for 45 seconds of your time. So fight for it. It's worth it. But now let's talk about the prizing. $2,500 in the top spot. And of course, 76 to 100th gets 100, which means everybody that is competing in the finals who has qualified on to this point is walking away with a chunk of change.
Yeah, you're at least able to get a little bit of money back here, $100 as long as you're able to qualify, but it's really that top 5 you want to shoot for. Just outside of 1,000 if you can get into top 5, but if you can get top 4, guaranteed at least 4 figures. It's a lot of money to play with, and a lot of money you could even buy more PlayStation 5s with, as we've been talking about all day long on EU and NA. We'll probably do the same. So many different things that PlayStation are putting out right now, whether it's the consoles, the new controllers, the new VR headsets. They've got everything under the sun, and you've got a chance to get some of that money yourself. Like we said, $2,500 going to first place is no small chunk of change. And, well, it's no small feat to even get here. We had 2 qualifiers just to get into this, and now the list of players and the rosters that are competing here today, my goodness, y'all better be prepared.
Yeah, let's take a look here at the qualified players. Convict, big name there, so we'll see how they play in this. But, again, so many talented people making it to the stage. Of course, Mystics, big one there as well. We're going to be watching Rapid. Rapid has been rapidly getting into the hearts of all the players around the world. And then, of course, FNCS contender himself, On1, competing in the PlayStation Cup here.
Yeah, On1's on this one as well as a couple other players that I'm hoping are going to pop up relatively soon. There he is, there. Bottom right. Byla competing in this one as well. There's a lot of players in NA that have stepped up their game and taken a little bit after EU and started competing in these cups.
No, absolutely. Well, if you don't know, actually, Bila, before he was an FNCS champion, before he bought a PC, was actually a PlayStation console player. So, fun fact there for Bila. Batman Booga, though, also in this one. It's going to be stacked, right? We obviously have the standard PlayStation names, but then you got the names of Vert, Bila. You have Revised in there. You have Batman Booga. All these players who are consistently up there at the top of their game, going to be playing it out. I'm so excited to see how this one will kind of come to fruition. But remember, this is the standard BR. This is, in fact, a solo competition, but is being played on a PlayStation console. So for those pro players who are typically used to playing on PC, maybe they just picked up a PlayStation to play this one off or whatever the case may be, they have a little bit of adjusting to get to be honest. So it all comes down to how they can fully adapt here to the PlayStation ecosystem and go head-to-head against the best PlayStation players from around the region.
The good thing is that we've been talking about this as well. PlayStation very much up to date in the specs that they're giving you nowadays. You've got a massive graphics card, a huge advantage in pretty much every right. And I mean, we even talked about this when it came to EU. We had players playing at other Fortnite events on PlayStations, qualifying for finals and walking away with money, all on a PlayStation console. So it's very much at the point where you're going to be playing on a very powerful machine, but it's how do you control the sticks and control your destiny. 6 games up, 6 games down, and if EU was any indicator, it's going to go all the way to 6, and that 6th game is going to be very important.
It's going to be close as we break down all the action for you. But of course, if you want to get involved at home, don't worry. We got you covered. There's 2 ways to get involved. Of course, you can go to compete.playstation.com. A lot of the information is located there. Of course, it's just information there on the website. So if you want to know anything about what's going on, the multiple titles that go on with the PlayStation Cup, check that out. But the cooler thing, in my opinion, of the 2 options is, of course, the Discord. If you don't know, PlayStation actually has a tournament community Discord where you can find regular updates on the esports events, articles, videos, and meet with others to improve your game. So you want to get involved in that Discord? Go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen right now or tap into the link there for your chance to be involved in the community. Of course, you already know we're out there, we're hanging out, so we want to see you hanging out in there too. Can't wait for you all to join the Discord. But of course, compete.playstation.com is where it's at. Both those locations. Find out everything going on between Fortnite PlayStation Cups and more throughout the year. Now, I want to say this, right? We're going to talk about it more later on when we get to the schedule at the end, but I really am excited for people at home, right? If you're a fighting game fan, this isn't necessarily Fortnite, but if you're a fighting game fan, you know what EVO is, right? There are a few more competitions up in the schedule that actually allow you to go to EVO if you win, right? So a couple of fighting opportunities. Definitely check that out. We'll talk more about it at the end of the show. So you want to make sure you're tuned in at the end of the show, not only to see the winners of the Fortnite PlayStation Cup, but also to get that information too. So you'll definitely want to be here. But it's almost time, Bass. My man, are you ready to get into game number 1?
I'm so ready for this one. I'm ready to see what NA has to offer as my home region here. I'd like to show that we can also compete on a PlayStation level. And honestly, I'd like to see all of our FNCS pros competing as well. Again, a lot of huge names here. I write down a couple of them just to make sure to reiterate so we can have a list. I probably missed 1 or 2 because we have 100 players competing. But players like Bila, Batman Booga, Burt, Revised, On1, Convict, so many players that are extremely prominent now have to try and compete in a solos event. And this is big because we don't have many solos events going on right now when it comes to the competitive scene for Fortnite. Everything mostly duo. So the fact that we've got a solos event here goes that these guys can prove that it's not just their duo carrying them the whole way. They can compete themselves. They can show themselves off. And today they've got to do exactly that. Again, $2,500 going to first means you take home all of that money yourself. So for every one of these players, they got to be on their A game.
That they do. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out here for a lot of players. Again, we talked about Bila. Of course, the story of Bila is so exciting, seeing him evolve from console to PC into the FNCS champion that he is. And then, of course, now still knowing his roots, competing in the PlayStation Cups. Love to see it. Of course, another outlier that I think a lot of people are going to tune into today, and of course, I hope we get some opportunities to tune in with him, is Revised. He is a controller player, extremely talented. We've seen him time and time again at top-level competitions whether it be big events in person or it be all the online events, he's there. This man is committed to the game, and of course, he's going to show up, I think, in my opinion, in big fashion. This has been his competitive year, and it doesn't surprise me to see that he's made it to the finals of the PlayStation Cup.
Yeah, most of the names that we see here at this point are relatively expected, but I do want to highlight what has probably been our favorite part about the PlayStation Cups as we hop off the battle bus and into game number 1. This is still a chance to prove yourself. We have seen many a player rise to prominence by doing well in PlayStation Cups, getting to know some of our top pros, and then going on to compete with them. My favorite story by far, Pixovsky, a PlayStation Cup winner in EU, then teams up with Queasy and wins the Console Cup as well. This is a chance for you to put your name on the map, and it all starts here in game number 1.
Yeah, let's get into it as game number 1 underway. I can't believe that we have been able to break down all the incredible action over there for the EU Zero Build Cup, and now we get to do the same here for NA's Standard BR Cup. I mean, look, we are just too lucky, guys.
Dude, look, I love this. I have been gracious enough to be able to be on this for about a half a year or so, maybe going on even a little bit longer than that. And we've been able to see a plethora of different competitions here through many iterations of the PlayStation Cup, and this one feels like it is all the more impactful because, again, we've been covering EU, we've been going over Europe and the region, but now it is a chance for NA to show what it's got. And I think the biggest thing for me, a lot of big names here, and those big names really need to show that it's not just their PCs that make them good. It is the fact that they are good that is going to show them off. And again, with the insane power that a PlayStation 5 holds, I think they're going to be more than okay with the capabilities at hand.
I mean, you're absolutely right. So we're going to have to tune in with several players here. And I'm always curious, right? Like, I wish there was an indicator that's like, oh, this is a PlayStation 5 player, this is a PlayStation 4 player. And because sometimes you can actually tell the difference. Because, I mean, the PS5 is just incredible. The technology behind it definitely leagues above any other console there out. So we'll see how these players compete with it on. But 2 eliminations here for Ladez. This is interesting. The reason I say that is we just got the first zone presenting itself, meaning that those were 2 eliminations made in the air. Another thing that's interesting, Blur Antics, my man from NA, is standardly a BR Zero Build player competing today here in this cup. Big name on the NA scene. Love to see him competing here.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep a little bit of a list here of all the players who I'm recognizing, who are prominent, who I think we're gonna have to keep our eyes on. And I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna get too expensive, and we're gonna have to keep our eyes on everybody, just as you guys should at home. Because again, it really is one of these things where these PlayStation Cups lend themselves to absolute chaos and results that you never expect. And again, a lot of that also is the fact that it's a solos event. Solos is one of those game modes where every risk that you make has to be calculated because you don't have a partner to get you back up. You don't have a trio to protect you. You have nobody but yourself. It is you, yourself, and, well, you. That's pretty much it. That's how you have to compete, is to play by yourself, for yourself, and calculate every risk that you take. And Blur, I don't think they're necessarily going to be a stranger to exactly that, but as we get further into the day, you'll start to see what I mean when some players just get caught off guard in moments that you never imagine.
Yeah, definitely going to play a key part now these things go, but Blur Antics, this guy, let's just talk about him for a moment, right? Obviously, standard a pro in the space, done a lot of things in Zero Build, but he's been more recently, he's been tapping in to the standard BR, so I'm glad to see he's stepping up to the plate. Also stepping up to the plate, though, Psycho King's here. Do you know who he was facing right there in that fight?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is that actually Day?
That is actually Day. So if you don't know, multi-FNCS champion right there, Day, has changed his name several times. Deshaun, of course, I think that's his birth name, if I'm not mistaken. But Day, of course, great character in the scene. Another one that we'll have to watch closely throughout because innately a controller player at heart. Always been on controller as long as he's competed. And him competing on PlayStation Cup will be no different. So remember, multi-FNCS champion, probably a top 5 finish, top 10 finish for this PlayStation Cup, if I had to predict.
I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, did we not see Day compete in a PlayStation Cup prior? I feel like we might have seen him in an E1 way back when. I don't remember if he necessarily did all too well. I'm not going to guarantee that. I'm not 100% on this one, but it definitely does feel like there's some expectations that still need to be met. We've seen this many times. We, again, in particular with EU, I remember Cammy was supposed to play in one of the events that we were casting. They failed to qualify. So don't necessarily sleep on these PlayStation players. If you think twice and just sort of approach this with not necessarily all the care in the world, they might just surprise you. Similarly to CRFR here, who kind of found themselves in a little bit of a surprise. Backs up against the wall corner of this building, trying to survive the battle that has ensued at Shattered Slabs. And I gotta say, it's gonna take me a second to get used to this. After doing 0 builds for an entire first bracket, or for an entire first event, and then now going into builds, this is gonna take a second or two for me to adjust.
I think it's going to take an adjustment period for sure, but we'll dive straight in as CRFR just trying to hold out here as I think that's X Evil, aka Love Backwards, just trying to get in here. You see that they're not overly aggressive though. I like this play style from them. They're not just diving in, they're not taking unnecessary risks. They're just trying to wait for the proper opportunity to present itself. And that's really smart to play here, especially in the standard BR, because one shot can convert an elimination either way. And the way that you have to play this, right? Remember, if you put an edit down or if you edit a floor or wall to take a fight, that means the other person has a second advantage to get ahead of you. So if you allow for that to happen and you don't get the shot that you need or want to convert the fight, you're going to lose the fight. And so I love this patience and just overall, like, passiveness for this fight. But sadly, it's not going to go in for Matey's favor as Evil, XO, or Love, OX, Backwards, has now gotten that elimination. And exactly like we said, we talked about playing patient, playing for the edit. And that's what he did, and walked away with an elim for it. Oh, gosh.
I don't know if there's necessarily the chance for patientness here out of Blur Antics. I'm going to interrupt myself, though, because look who's popping up in the feed already in a bad way. Revised out before our top 80. And again, this is where you've got to give respect to these PlayStation players. Even if you are an FNCS pro, even if you are one of the best that this planet has to offer, it does not mean that you are safe, especially with the solos game mode. This is where it makes a difference, is that if you mess up even once, that could be the end of your game. There is no second chance. There is no revive. There is no chance that your teammate back you up. It is you alone who must carry the weight of your team. So Blur playing this one very safely. You can see he's trying to take shots at Jay from a distance to kind of turn him away from taking on this initial engagement, because he needs to heal back on up, make sure he's at the best possible position to take this fight. Now that he is going to take that fight. Recognizing Jay from a distance, shots on target. But a quick build's going to at least be able to stave off any damage for now. As Blur, not necessarily a rock and a hard place, but yeah, I was about to say, they probably need to get out of this fight. If they stick around too long, it could be a problem.
Yeah, definitely the right decision here, using the mud to just slip on in. And oh, I thought for sure he was actually going to dive in the box there, but Blur gonna just kind of patiently cause some issues for this player, right? He's just kind of antagonizing him a little bit around the box. He was up on top of the box waiting for him to try to make an edit, and then he just kind of left himself open around the box waiting for him to make an edit, and the player never budged. So great on them, but for Blur Antics, didn't necessarily work out to his game plan. But now taking some punishment there from Jays, as he just doesn't want to let him rotate freely. So smart play there on his part, but now we see some of the mud rotates that we saw since the new season has started. But oh no, Blur Antics not almost getting caught out there as Quartz ends up taking the fight, but Quartz now very, very weak. So for Blur, he just needs to get in there. Can he convert this into an elimination as he tries to spam through? But player does end up disengaging. There it is, the big play going through the zip line. He's going to go through again. Can he convert the shots? And he does. He actually picks up the elimination there onto Court.
Yeah, but he needs to be careful. The only reason he got that elimination on Court in the first place is shots from a distance that drained him of his shield. And unfortunately, not necessarily going to have a chance to be able to use a Siphon. Not a thing anymore. You're going to have to heal yourself back on up. No health gain from an elimination on another player. So play this one carefully. Like we said, every risk that you take has to be calculated. Because if you dive into a fight, it's not just surviving that initial fight, it's surviving any of the third party that comes afterwards. So some of our players doing a good job at that so far. Other players not so lucky. Like we said, Revive's going home a little bit early here, and Vinyl might join them. 3 health left. They get so lucky on the timing with that wall.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct here. Big fight there. Could have converted, but now he's back in Storm. I don't know if he realizes what's happening. He needs to hit the med miss. He can't afford it. He does get one spray off, enough to keep him in it here. And sure enough, now just trying to play at any angle he can. So this should be enough space for him between him and the opponent that he should be able to heal up quite nicely. He does have the minis. He has the half pot. He has plenty to work with, but we'll see how it plays out. As actually, look at that there in the feed or in the map. Joe spams you, completely deciding to rotate away.
Again, this is what it is. A lot of these early engagements are going to be players kind of testing the waters, if you will. Again, this is game number 1 of 6. You do not want to put yourself in a bad position to start off the day, because otherwise you're playing catch-up for the rest of it. We saw this in EU as well. Players really started to kind of tighten up by around game 3 or 4, and honestly, I'm being generous by saying that they had until 4 to tighten up. You really had to establish yourself by the halfway point, so if you don't have a good game number 1, set you back pretty heavily and force you to play some catch-up the rest of the time. Unfortunately, for Confi there, that's going to be another player that has to do catch-up. Blur Antics already on their 3rd elimination.
Yeah, this is not surprising here for Blur Antics. Definitely has a base understanding of how to handle game number 1. And remember, game number 1 plays out exactly like this. And I tell people this all the time. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But the way that it works is, in game 1, you have a lot of players who have minimal experience or no experience in these closed lobbies like the PlayStation Cup. And it's not necessarily easy to get to this point. So for these players, they're definitely gifted that have made it here. However, experience is everything and nerves are everything. So game 1 is all about controlling your nerves. And Blur Antics knows this. This is why he's pushing these players in the manner that he is because he feels confident that their nerves are high and that he's going to be able to catch them making mistakes and ultimately resulting in a few additional eliminations as the game progresses on.
No, game going to continue to progress on here, and we're going to start to get a bit further into the zones, meaning chaos going to be abundant here. This is what we really saw, was that usually a slow start to the game, players not as aggressive with those initial challenges, but as time goes on, more aggression starts to show itself, especially around the halfway point through the zones. Again, 12 total zones now mean that once you get to that halfway point at 6, that's where it really pops off. Players start to get aggressive, start to challenge boxes, but again, that was for 0 builds. We're going to have to see what it's like in the solos environment here for builds. And again, it's more or less unfamiliar territory. Obviously, we've got the qualifiers to reference, but qualifiers a little bit of a different game. Obviously, we've got FNCS to reference with a lot of the players that are participating in it, but it's a different game as well due to it being a duos event. So not only is it builds, not only is it solos, not only is it the PlayStation Cup, but it is a culmination of all of those that make this tournament so unpredictable. So keep your eye on game number 1, and keep your eye on the feed in the top left. On 1, out in game number 1 before the top 70.
See, this is what I'm saying, right? These pros are so used to their environment that they're in that they come to the PlayStation Cup and think that they are safe, but guess what? They are not safe here, especially for the players like Day, who has experience here on the console, on the sticks, and knows how to get those eliminations. Saw him light up the feed here, but now we got to talk about it. FNCS multi-time champion. Then he takes kind of a break from the game, doesn't take it as seriously, plays like more casually. And then I feel like in recent months, Day has had this like newly reinvigorated focus on playing Fortnite. So hopefully that's a good sign for us because we all love Day gameplay over here in the Casters booth.
Oh, 100%. Day, one of the first players I really got to see at a higher level competition. Really one of my first big tournaments that I was able to work on was DreamHack last year in Dallas, and Day competed in that as well. It was a solos event back then too, and he didn't do too poorly, so he's got some experience within the solos realm. He knows exactly how to play it, but does anybody know how to play this place? Here it is. We've been talking about it all day. It is finally time for the Rift Island to show itself and show WTJ a way in. What an elim!
Beautiful elimination there for Jay, and it looks like no one else is going to be contesting him. That's a good sign for him. He should be able to take the capture point pretty freely as long as he doesn't get challenged. And so that's going to be 15 points on the board for Jay, as long as, of course, he can maintain that. Which we saw in the Zero Builds tournament earlier being such a key factor to the success of the top 5 teams. So we'll see how Jay ends up finishing off the day, but great start here for him.
Great start for him, but not many can be saying the same right now. Another player popping up in the top left that you might notice, Byla, also out here in game number 1. The numbers just keep racking up. The only ones I can remember off rip right now, On One, Byla, Revised, all going down here before we even get into our top half of this first game. I feel like we've already said it enough times, but I'll reiterate one more time. You cannot come into this expecting it to just be something you can breeze by, even if you are the best of the best. It is what makes these PlayStation Cups so much more invigorating, is that it is a chance to prove yourself if you are one of those unknown players. I mean, heck, we saw that today. Luis taking first place from Butter, 2 players that are not very prevalent within the scene, but they definitely will be after today.
They definitely have the opportunity to showcase for more people here in the future what they can do. But Day, again, showcasing that he has a good mindset for how to handle this fight. You saw him immediately moving himself into one of these buildings. He knows as much existing structure as possible is going to be important, because some of this is actually indestructible. Keep that in mind too as we progress on. In Mega City, a lot of the buildings structurally from the outside you cannot break. In the floors, you cannot break, which means if you want to keep yourself safe, you kind of play towards these buildings.
There isn't a lot of safe here in Mega City, though, I will say that much. With the amount of players that we do have, it almost always ends up turning into a firefight between everybody, and it doesn't look like Day's shying away from that whatsoever. Although, I gotta appreciate that. Day really is showing the amount of respect he has for this lobby right now by taking 2 shots and then immediately bunkering up as best that he can to just try and keep any and all attention away from him. It's clever, and it's also necessary. Again, solo's such a volatile game mode to where if you stay out for a little bit too long, it can cause you problems. So Day playing a very better safe than sorry approach, something that we saw come to a huge amount of aid to many different players in our EU event. Ooh, Dunks, though, right now, doing a good job of just making sure to get tags from a distance. Everybody else inside of Mega City, meanwhile, he's just on the outskirts, and based on where the zone's pulling, he might be in the best position possible.
And we could see that from them. It just depends on how they play the positioning here and how the zone continues to pull in different ways. Nevertheless, though, you see teams out there in the distance. Blur Antics still in this one. I love to see that, especially after seeing FNCS champions like Byla go down early in this one, showing that it doesn't matter what your stature, what your name, what your experience is. The PlayStation Cup is a battleground, and no one is safe.
On Battleground right now being Mega City. Look how many players have found their way into it. And on top of the amount of players that have found their way into it, look how many players are going to have to traverse through it. Half and half zone has arrived, meaning as soon as that ticks down in about 20 seconds, we are going to have a very chaotic movement and really a migration, I would say, from most of this game here in game number 1. 60 players still to go, so this might be where we start to see that number rapidly drop off, Panda. It feels like not nearly that many players are going to be able to move through the very heavily congested streets of Mega City.
Well, remember, this is going to be very, very different than Zero Build, right? So Zero Build, typically at this point, we're seeing like 30, 40 teams alive. And so that in this mode, it's obviously players, right? So 30 to 40 players alive, up and at it. In the standard BR, we will get the full 12 zones here, which we don't typically get in Zero Build, which is always nice to have that varying perspective. And so once this, I'm assuming this game is going to get to zone 12, and we'll have 2 or 3 players left fighting for the final spot. So can't wait to see who that's going to be. Is Casher here, or CZ Sure, or CZSHR dash, whatever you want to call yourself. I don't judge. You do you.
Like
taking the highest position on the map. Unfortunately, because there's no snipers, definitely very, very safe. And there it is. Nice little beam from this person, this player, stepping up to the plate in a lot of ways. I do like the structure that they've built, although they did have to use quite a few material to get that. And now that the zone is pulling away from them, they're just going to have to move.
big issue also, again, when it comes to getting through Mega City is that when you do go up high like that, like you said, you're making a pretty risky bet that you're going to be able to make it not only to the top and get eliminations there, but then you're going to be able to get down. There's going to be a lot of players just looking up, looking to the rooftops to try and get some easy eliminations. That was a pretty easy one there as treatment goes down very quickly. And, well, it wasn't just to the hands of Call Me Up. It is also Storm Surge officially in play here, and that's why Call Me Up is getting so aggro. You have to make sure you have the damage. Otherwise, if you do not, you're in for a bit of a problem. Doesn't look like Call Me Up's in too much of one right now. They're doing a good job. Themselves steady. Decent amount of shield, decent amount of health on them. But again, you can just see it. Players starting to turn up the heat here as the aggression is at an all-time high. Storm Surge officially off threshold. Not going to be a factor for at least this zone.
Yeah, I mean, Call Me Up is fighting for their life right now. This player that is fighting them is not giving up. So finally, going to find some separation. But it's actually Evil again. XO Evil, this guy. Player obviously in the space. He's been around for a bit. And so to see him being as aggressive as he is, it's definitely the confidence that I know he has. But man, you got to be careful with that because sometimes it'll guide you in the wrong direction.
It looks like the direction right now is north. Everybody having to go up there to try just get to the outskirts of Mega City. And again, big issue there is that also going to be a hill that they all have to climb. Look at it, the amount of people who have built up the side of this mountain. Call Me Up might just be the next one, or they go hunting for a couple more eliminations. A couple of players just loose, straggling behind here. Be some free damage for any of the players that are able to turn around and pull a quick 180. Oh, looks like they're actually being able to escape most of the damage, trying to traverse that left side here of the mountain, but I think that they're not the only person with that idea, Panda. 47 players here, and pretty much all of them on the south side of this zone.
Yeah, I think they knew what was about to happen here as they progress over to this side. You can sometimes typically predict the way the zones are going to move, and a lot of these players knew exactly what was about to happen, but Blur Antics still in this one. 3 eliminations, nicely done so far, but he needs to stay into the final moments. A lot of players think, oh man, this is the end game. I've made it. I've done well. That's not the case.
Nope.
When you are getting to this point, which is great, and you've definitely gotten far in the game, but the problem is placement really starts popping in the top 20, top 25, top 30. And so that's where you really need to find yourself so you can get as many points as possible and remain consistent. So that'll change here rapidly, right? Because again, while it's 46 players up now, within 2 minutes, again, mark it, 2 minutes, we'll have less than half that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is just kind of how it goes. And you guys can see that already. Yomi finding themselves a quick elimination, and it only feels like that is just kind of the, I don't know, the signal flag for everybody else to get going. And I think that they can seem to agree. Shots firing left, right, and center right now as players like Wavy just trying to survive. They've got 3 eliminations, so they're probably not going to have to worry about that Storm Surge as the damage threshold does pop up on the right side, and it looks like they are indeed relatively comfortable. But we can't say the same for all the other players remaining here as we close out of our 8th zone and figure out where the 9th one's going to go. We going back into Mega City? No, we're not. We're heading north a little bit. So again, another traverse for all of these players. They are on the north side of zone, most of them, I should say. Wavy may not join them, though. 16 health, and if their opponent is clever, they're going to chase them down and try and finish the job.
And I think they can do just that. We'll see how it plays out, though. Now, Wavy, Mac here, healing up with the med miss, doing a good job of just staying in this one. He created a nice box-to-box separation from the other player, which is key. You see him, he does have about 2 boxes left between him and that other player, so fortunately should be able to stay safe. But Vanti rocking the Breacher Shotgun. This is actually huge. We haven't been seeing, we've been seeing a lot of the Breacher Shotgun in 0 build, and now we're starting to see that more and more trickle over into standard BR. I love it. I love it so much. I love to see the evolution of gameplay with exotics and everything else come into the traditional comp mode. But now, though, it's Ben. But it's not Ben K, it's Ben X here, fighting up against Convict, but immediately getting beat up from the back. Needs to be very, very mindful of their position. They are roughly in the second height, low to mid-tier level, and sadly, they're going to get caught out as Ian now going to be healing up with the Slurp Juice, just trying to stay alive, but now the focus is on Day.
Oh, Day in a decent position here, but my biggest concern, 45 builds total. not necessarily a ton to work with overall here. So he's going to have to be careful as he goes through previous tarps and just kind of plays around his opponents, having to waste a little bit of those builds. And having to waste even more as he's trying to use a big pot and doesn't exactly have the time to. He's going to need a refresh here, but he's down to the top 20, so at least a solid game here for Day to start off, which cannot be said with many of the other competitors here that have also risen to heights like Day, but he still has to finish the job. 1v1, shotgun in hand, and he will do it. Second elimination for Day, but he's not done yet. Has to keep marching, and he cannot. The Storm gonna do him in, similar to many of the opponents around him. We are down to our top 15.
Here, down to it all. Last few players remaining. We'll see how this plays out here as Isa Modog healing up here with Medmiss. He's got 2 Medmiss in the inventory. And again, Convict still in this one. A lot of new names stepping up to the plate as the notable names are all dropping like flies here. Isa, one of those names here, stepping up in a big way. Domstar, though, also playing for this one. It looks like potentially had the high ground, now going to have to be forced off of it because they have no material, and that's just how this goes, right? You have to watch and be mindful of the material you have left, but no, Dom goes down. That's going to be Convict picking him up, doing as much as he can here to survive, and this is it. Watch this play. Knowing exactly what's about to happen, Convey was going to pick that one up no matter what. He knew the player was going to come towards him. That's why you saw him patiently shut off the med miss and take the shot.
There may not be any one-shot snipers in the game right now, but there absolutely are one-shot shotguns if you give them a chance. One and done there. Convict in a great position to take it all home, but he's got to be careful. Low on health, trying to use his med miss, but Rappy in a pretty bad position. They're on the low ground. They've got heals abundant, but unfortunately their opponent just has the better position. Zone to them. They got to make a height up, and I don't think they're even going to try. They're just going to try to out-heal their opponent, but what they don't realize is that JB doesn't got to move anywhere. They just got to stay with the zone. They're absolutely able to outlast, and Rappy, you can try all you want. 0 builds in hand. A med miss that will soon run out. Say sayonara. I think we got a definitive winner as JBCAOLOL takes game number 1.
Big congratulations over there to JB. Big win to start the day. And man, a bit of a misplay there. I'm going to be honest with you. You had 2 med miss, right? You could run around the right side of the hill, try to find your way into zone other ways. Unfortunately, it didn't work out in their favor. I saw what they were trying to do, though. They were trying to pick up builds while taking the med miss. Guess what? You can't do that, sadly. But nevertheless, great to see a starting off win with JB. Huge win for them. But we have 5 more games to go. That was only game number 1 of 6 incredibly packed NA or standard BR action. And it all started, man, Blur antics. I'm so excited he's here.
We got to focus on Blur, man. He came out the gates absolutely swinging, just diving in every box, taking every engagement imaginable. And, well, the same thing can't be said for many of his other competitors here. We saw a lot of big names go down early. And, again, we don't know the full story. We weren't able to watch all of them, but only a couple of very prominent players really gave the respect. And Day, absolutely one of them. That was only his second elimination, and the only other one he was able to find. Players like Rapid, players like Convict, a lot of other players being able to show themselves early. And, well, look who's on top. Jay gonna find themselves their first place position, even though they didn't necessarily get first.
And you know why, right? You know as well as I do why Jay is up there. And it is, of course, because he got the POI Rift capture point. And because he got the 15 points from that, it placed him well above the rest of the competition.
That's what you gotta do. You just gotta play this one more clever than the rest of them. Again, if Solos is going to continue to be this chaotic the entire way through, look for other ways to get points. You don't need to expose yourself and find yourself in these rough positions where you're constantly taking engagements, because you can earn points other ways. And we're not talking about placement. We are talking about the mid-match objectives. Being able to find bullets, being able to find caches, being able to find and capture that loot island. All of those are extremely prominent. And for players like Bila, you see in 68th there, that's kind of going to have to be a necessity for them going forward. Them on 1. I believe also Revised is going to pop up here. Yeah, 82nd place. A lot of big names going down early. And now, unfortunately for them, comes the catch-up game for the remaining time here in the PlayStation Cup.
Yeah, we'll see who can actually catch up here as we continue on with these games. Of course, as we prepare for game number 2, though, you have to think for a moment, right? What was the biggest absence from that end game? The high-level pros, right? Again, we're talking about Bila. we're talking about Revise, the current pros who find themselves closer and closer to the top of the FNCS leaderboard, not necessarily finding their way in game number 1. But of course, you know what? It happens, right? I'll let it slide just one time, but they need to make some adjustments here going into game 2. And that's my point. Game 1 is the one game you are allowed to make those mistakes. Find out your game plan, adjust the game plan, and move forward. But Bass, one tip from you for the players competing. What do they got to do game 2 to game 6 to come out on top?
Focus on taking engagements you know you can win. And when you find those engagements, don't back down. I know it's not zero builds, but we saw this so many times with players that would start an engagement, get into that 1v1, see a little bit of vulnerability in their opponents, and then kind of hightail it. But the issue is that if you see vulnerability in your opponents and then don't capitalize, that is where your opponents recognize your lack of courage to dive in and then just turn it around on you within the blink of an eye. Again, builds is going to make that a little bit different, but if you show yourself in any sort of disadvantage, players will take advantage of said disadvantage and just utilize it tenfold. You need to make sure you are going into these fights confident, and if you don't believe in yourself in the fight, don't take it. Do not risk the one life you have per game to go into a fight haphazardly and then just go down early. We saw that with way too many high-level pros in that first game, and if they're not careful, it's going to happen to them again throughout the rest of the night.
Yeah, I could agree more. There's great advice there for sure, and hopefully some of these pros maybe hear it, maybe not, and then take advantage of those tips. But nevertheless, get locked in, get ready to go. Game number 2 is almost here. And of course, for you all at home thinking, man, that game was fun. Like, I could have played that, right? Maybe I could have competed in that. Well, don't worry. You can. If you go to compete.playstation.com, we have all the information on future events and more located right there. And of course, every time a PlayStation Cup is added for Fortnite or for any other title, it'll be right there at the compete.playstation.com. So go check out the website. Make sure you get all the information on this event and more in the future if you want to compete. And I know a lot of you at home are looking at this like, man, I want to. So take advantage, compete.playstation.com, get involved, and hopefully we'll see you up here on the leaderboard or on the game so we can be calling out all the action for you and help hype it up you all at home. But of course, thank you all to the chat being here. It's almost time. Game number 2. One thing I will say that of course, we've talked about this a little bit, Bass. Limited mobility has changed the way that the game is played, period, right? So when the zone pool is heavy, we're seeing a lot of issues for teams that land the opposite end. For you, right, what is one mobility item you wish you could see back here in this current season?
Oh, I want the kinetic blade back, man. I feel like we didn't get to see the full potential of it. I know that people had their ups and downs about the kinetic blade, but the big thing for me is that I feel like we were only just discovering what could be done with this mobility item. We were starting to see plays with it at the very end, at the very tail end of its life. That was really interesting to me. Would have loved to seen that back in this current season. But the thing is that now that we don't have the kinetic blade, now that we don't have the ODM gear, now that we don't have the web slingers, you gotta get creative. We have seen players playing like that today. We have seen a multitude of creative ways to rotate in. But now here, as we get into game number 2, you gotta make sure that you pull that off with absolute precision. Every movement you make, every mistake you make is highlighted tenfold, and well, every vault that you capture is 3 points as well. Remember, focus on the fact that you can earn points not just through eliminations, not just through placement, through other ways in mid-match objectives. So as you hop off the battle bus into game 2, get ready. You're gonna have to play this one as best you can because we're really only just getting started tonight.
Let's see how this plays out. Stacky is better. Set up here. Looks like going just east of the Citadel. See where they end up landing. Could be actually just, probably going for this tower right now. Smart positioning for them. If they can find an AR here close to the top and look around to the other players landing, could get some nice shots or even a nice elimination on one. And that's what they're going to go ahead and do. You see them connecting one shot. Unfortunately, not going to be able to connect anymore after that. But nevertheless, still a little bit of surge damage as the game's just starting. Gotta love it. But Stacky now gonna go ahead and loot the rest of this building. But man, fights are starting already, and that is Prodigy over there in the elimination feed taking out Destiny.
Yeah, they're getting started early here. Again, players really trying to make up for game number 1 if they had a lackluster performance. Blur did not have a lackluster performance, but they're still happy to try and get a couple eliminations along the way. And again, it's not unsurprising from Blur. Blur, a rather aggressive player in game 1, had one or two engagements got a little bit more heavily in their favor, they probably would have been set up for that end game just a little bit better. But a player that did make it to the end game and we didn't speak too much about, but definitely should be, Vert, another very prominent name here in this day, who has played well in many events prior, not only in PlayStation, but really just all across the board for Fortnite. So pay attention to them. They're definitely going to be a name that pops up a lot here tonight and will be a factor in every fight that they take. And the fact that they're landing Citadel more or less uncontested, probably not a great thing for the rest of the lobby.
That's a good call out there for sure. It's a nice position there for them to be at. And Revised, of course, one of those players we talked about early on and unfortunately didn't have the strongest game number one. Gonna come back with a vengeance strong here in game number two, and that's why you see them rocking the new Flapjack rifle. This thing is a powerhouse weapon, one of the highest DPS weapons in the game as of right now. Of course, trying to be patient. I think this other player is going to realize they're there, but switch on over as Big Yayan is going to go ahead and take this fight against Cow. See how this plays out as they're just kind of playing left and right, not necessarily doing too much here in the start of the fight, but no, now the fight really begins as Yayan takes so much damage that unfortunately there's just no coming back from it.
Cow doing a good idea there, just kind of sneaking around the back of them, finding an easy shotgun shot, and from then on out, they just kind of had them on the ropes, just slowly retreating further and further, and there was no retreat to get out of that fight. Honestly, I gotta say, I'm surprised we don't have a fight here either. Last we saw Revised, they were charging towards the other opponent, but looks like they've kind of skedaddled out of there quickly enough that they could avoid the fight altogether. And again, probably for the better. Nobody wants to try and fight Revised early on, especially after a lackluster game number one. They're really looking to try and prove themselves here in game number two. Same with Rapid Boy, who find themselves only 4 points so far through the first game, so they got to kind of show that they got a little bit more left in store here. Otherwise, not necessarily going to be a great start to the day. Again, it's these really interesting sort of capture points, not exactly bolts here, that players are able to find. Again, new POIs just showing so much new loot that players aren't aware of. Rapid Boy doing a good idea, taking it all home for themselves.
Yeah, definitely going to be one of the players to watch. Rapid has a past of being a great collegiate, or not collegiate, standard pro player. So good to see them competing in the PlayStation Cup. And of course, CR from Maddie. Right back with them again as they're just trying to dive in here, get involved in the fight. You love to see them breaking builds, forcing the fight here as this player now just trying to run away. Big shot comes through there. Almost no shield on Zevo, so we'll see how he can play this out. Going to be tough, though, for Maddie. Not going to allow for any kind of separation as this player just continues almost to run directly into their forehead, but then realizes, wait, where did this player go? It's got to be here. I see the healing animation. I know it's close. Is it right here? Let me go ahead and actually not heal up myself, but go ahead and increase my speed just in case I need to get out of this fight. As they're just going to decide to disengage. Interesting decision here. But
not exactly what I was expecting. They looked like they had the advantage in the fight for a pretty long time and then just kind of disengage. Again, we've talked about this. It really is about making sure that you know you can win the fight, not think you can win the fight, because if you misjudge it and all of a sudden be going down and going home pretty quickly. Stacky realizes that very quickly, as well as Saucy gets a decent amount of damage on them, less than 50 combined health between Shields and Reed, but looks like they should be good to go. I think they're going to be able to heal back enough and take that fight a little bit more precisely. And Kanji do the same thing. Looks like they're backed up against the wall here in Brutal Bastion, and not a good place to be, especially not with G-Money, I believe, on the other side there, just kind of slowly making their way in. This is very much a stuck between a rock and a hard place type of scenario for them here, Panda.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We'll see how it plays out as they just try to make their way out as Kanji doesn't realize that player's there. Big shot comes through now. Unfortunately, they're losing every advantage they have. The cone is not there, the wall is not there, so they jump in, and it could be a big elimination, and it is! Wow! What a perfectly played, fight. Let me tell you why this is so important to what just happened. He was losing every advantage. He started losing the fight. His only option was to jump into the box and pressure him in a way that would cause him to make mistakes. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did there. Did it with the Flapjack rifle too. I'm telling you, that thing is going to be special.
I don't know what it is, but NA seems to agree with you much more about the Flapjack rifle than EU did. We very rarely saw players using Flapjack rifle when it came to EU gameplay. Now all of a sudden we switch over to NA and everybody seems to have it in their inventory, although I say that immediately Backtalk tries to correct me by not having it in their inventory, but most players right now having it in their inventory and really utilizing it tenfold as well. You talked about how it had insane DPS, but a lot of players using this actually from a distance, surprisingly, and hitting most of their shots as well. Bloom not too aggressive on that, so they're able to do a decent amount of damage from a little bit of a whiles away and still not be too concerned. JB, though, our Game 1 winner, not focused on trying to use the Flapjack rifle and not focused on just doing a little bit of damage. They're trying to drill their opponent and drain them of everything, and they heard the shield crack. To go in for a little bit more. They probably should have, or at least not taking their eyes away from them. They start focusing on other fights and very quickly were punished, having to use a couple of their small pots just to heal back on up. Again, focused on JB. They did a good job in game number 1, found themselves the W or the VR, but in game number 2, there's a lot more to play for here, as it feels like the chaos and the sort of unfamiliarity that we saw in game 1, not nearly as prevalent here in game number 2.
You're absolutely right, and so we'll see how this continues to play out, and Backtalk actually opting to get away. You know what? Honestly, probably the right play at this point, to be honest. He got some floppers. He can play the storm a little bit, and he's just going to rotate around late, but he can't see what we can see, and it's that he's getting ready to potentially fly into another player. That could be a problem for him, but Revise now, interestingly enough, like clearly realizes someone's close. Just zero clue where they're at as of right now. They probably stopped moving, making it very hard to track. And Byla. Oh, Byla. The man, the myth, the legend himself. We will see what he can make of this, as looking pretty set. You got an incredible loadout with the MK Alpha being the legendary variant. You got 2 Slurp Juices, which are both legendary. If you don't know, that's the newest version of the Slurp Juice in the game. The last 2 seasons, this bad boy has been a powerhouse item for any players that are able to get it from the vaults or from capture points, whatever. And then, of course, the Slap Juice is for mobility. Because, again, with mobility being as limited as it is, you have to resort to whatever you can find. Slap Juices being one of those things that you can find.
Yeah, absolutely. Slap Juice has been an interesting introduction into Fortnite in the ways that it really has affected. And I think in this season in particular, like you said, with mobility being limited, they're even more powerful than they would have been in seasons past. Byla seems to know that. They got a stacked inventory right now, and they're not really shying away from fights. But to be honest, I don't know if it's necessarily them trying to get eliminations as much as just tags. Again, Storm Surge wasn't a very prevalent factor in game number 1. I would not be surprised to see it here in game number 2. Byla still trying to find themselves their first elim here, despite the fact that they have a very good inventory. Again, not only the fact that they've just got multiple items on them, pretty much full builds at this point as well. So Byla in probably the best position possible. They're just going to wait until they're forced to go into the zone here, as they're just barely outside the edge of it. But maybe just trying to look for stragglers on the way in. A player that's probably doing a similar idea, as they also hug just the very edge here of the circle, is going to be Day. Again, not a bad game number 1, but that only getting a second elimination and then going down just to get to the top 20, I think they might be hungry for just a little bit more.
Absolutely they are, and I can only imagine, especially Day in the position that they're in, a lot of pressure on their shoulders to not only compete but to perform. And this being one of those lobbies you got to perform well in, because all eyes are here on the PlayStation Cup today, as everything goes hopefully according to plan for Jay Deno, who picks up a nice little elimination and the refresh that they needed. You see, they didn't have a ton of heals that they could work with, multi-faceted heals, I should say, meaning they had a nice shield, but they didn't really have any white heals. Now the Slurp Juices are going to fill that void for them from that elimination. So that alone makes the elim worth it, of course, as well as the 2 points.
You always want to do whatever you can to get a little bit of those points. We talked about it a lot here today, though. There's a plethora of ways for you guys to earn points right now, but it's not just the elimination, it's not just placements. You've also got the availability to try and get some of those vaults, trying to get some of those cash, trying to get some of the loot island as well. So there's a multitude of different ways to earn yourself some of those sweet points, and then potentially earn some prize money. But you also still do have to survive, and for TV Pickle here, that's a little bit easier said than done. Backs against the wall, having to burn through their builds, as they're now underneath 40, almost underneath 30, as more and more shots fire from a distance, and I don't even know if they're sure where from. It just kind of feels like the rapid building walls. Finally, they've found found the opening on their opponent, but they're not even going to fire back. And Panda, I don't think it's due to their own choice here. They've got barely any ammo to work with. They try and fire through a wall in return, and that might be all the AR ammo they've got in their inventory.
Yeah, not a lot here. When your AR matches your shotgun ammo, you know there's a problem either way. So realistically, definitely going to have to be mindful of what they have left. But of course, Christian out here with the Breacher shotgun. Believe it or not, playing a little bit passive for the loadout that they have, right? The Breacher shotgun allows you to break builds pretty easily. And for them, all you have to do is kind of break the build, jump in, switch to the MK Alpha, especially when you have a health advantage like they did. Although, you know what? They could be more passive. And looking at what they have in their inventory, I'm not surprised why. Only 31 builds to work with is not a lot. They're going to have to start bringing that pickaxe out and swinging. And if they don't do that quick, they're going to run into some issues. But little fun fact, if you didn't know, right? Pickaxe for the longest time was in fact called the harvesting tool. It wasn't actually called the pickaxe, right? You know what Fortnite did? They actually went in the beginning of this update and they put out a video, right? Like fully like hype video. And they're like, we made a major update. And it's just them changing at the bottom right corner. It's saying harvesting tool. And they just like backspace harvesting tool and put pickaxe. Like that's just like bravo. We love Fortnite.
I'm just thinking of that one soundbite where it's that dude aggressively clapping and then going, yeah! And that's all I can imagine as my reaction to that entirety. I will say, as one of the OG guys who picked up Fortnite in its very first season when it came out as Battle Royale, I do remember back then even questioning why it was called the harvesting tool. And, well, nice to see that it's got to change to the pickaxe. Also nice to see not much has changed from EU. People still not prioritizing the Rift Island nearly enough. This Rift POI should be heavily contested, and for about 10 to 15 seconds there, nobody was on it. Eventually, players come on, but Panda, there was absolutely a chance for someone to take that pretty much uncontested, and it took far too long for anybody to notice, and now we do have a fight for the POI and for the 15 points that could be around if you're able to take it. Side, though, apparently doesn't want the POI. They just want the Elim, dropping off from the cap and immediately going headhunting, and it pays off.
That was a huge misplay there for Scythe. Of course, taking a lot of damage, does get the elimination, but Revise, fortunately for Side, Revise is actually going to challenge the capture point, which is going to keep it from growing anymore. Ultimately, if Side had taken that fight and Revise didn't show up, the capture would have been done. It would have been completed because it was so close. You could see it there moments ago when they got close that Dalka was not too far off from capturing that. So realistically, definitely an interesting play choice. But if you're Dalka, you want people to leave. You're like, hey, listen, let me get these 15 points, man. I didn't have a great game one. Like, it's okay. Like, I'll take these.
I mean, look, I'm gonna be real. Generosity any other day of the week, I'm gonna encourage it very, very thoroughly. Generosity in a PlayStation Cup with thousands of dollars on the line and 15 free points. Yeah, get that out of here. I'm not with it. You gotta make sure that you're trying to fight for every point that you can get, and Dalka's doing exactly that. They are not backing off this point, even with other players starting to surround them. It doesn't look like Revise is the only person on this island. Looks like a couple other players have come to play, and including some taking the top of the house here, maybe just looking to see if anybody pops their head up so they can take a shot on. Only two players still on the cap, though. Are Revise and Dalka here? Is anybody else going to get involved? I mean, you can see it. Grimm's below thinking about getting involved. A couple other players on just sort of the outskirts thinking about getting involved, but the only two willing to take this fight are Revise and Dalka. And honestly, I don't know if Revise knows where Dalka is. They're firing into every wall except for the one that Dalka's hiding behind.
Smart too. Revise is actually not only like really trying to hunt for Dalka, but at the same time trying to replace as many of these builds as they can. The more control that Revise has, the better off they will be when they inevitably are forced to fight. Because remember, you can't sit up here forever. You can't just sit here and wait for everything to go by. Like, no, that's just not how it works. You're gonna have to fight inevitably. So for Revise, they're preparing for that moment when it comes, and smart on them, especially because look at what they have control of, right? They have control of the most important box on the island right now, and that is the box where all of the loot will drop once the Rift Island is complete. So smart play on their part, though we'll have to see how this fight continues on, because again, game one, it wasn't a real factor, right? Not too many people were really fighting for it. Game two, however, everybody realized pretty much instantly, like, oh yeah, we kind of need this.
I will say, Revised in particular really needs it as well. We talked about it. He went out way too early in game number one. Now, as a result, you can see it. The total points. Even Side, another player that is now approaching, has more points than them. So Revised looking to use this as a way to kind of jumpstart their day, just boost them up a little bit extra to maybe give them those points necessary to catch up to the rest of the pack. So they're not backing away. And to be honest, they didn't need to up until about now. The Storm was not going to overtake the new POI here, but now all of a sudden Floating Island not nearly in the zone, and not only is it not within the circle, it's actually pretty far away from it. So a lot of these players that were not only banking on being able to get this POI, but were also banking on being able to just sort of snipe players as they hop off of the Floating Island, not working out. Revised, though, has been using his strategies, throwing in the swarm, and now he's starting to cause some chaos here as looks like he's slowly gaining the POI. Is anybody going to contest him for the capture? Revised might be getting a free 15 points. Somebody put a hand up, get in his way, do something to stop him, and it's not going to happen. Revised with a huge capture here. The loot is his and the 15 points that come with it.
Massive here for him. He did have another player pushing him, but ultimately they just kind of gave up, and it was Side actually going for it. That was one of the players that initially got on the spot, but inevitably realized, you know what, maybe I'm taking too much damage, maybe I'm spending too much time, and I'm just going to disengage because this person wasn't going to give it up. And sure enough, it was Revised, and he was not going to give it up.
He's not going to give it up, but unfortunately, Byla's going to have to give up on this second game. Not sure if you saw that. We popped up in the top left yet again. Another game where Byla just not able to show himself how he should. And again, we say how he should because Byla has been one of the best that we have seen throughout professional play in the history of Fortnite, one of the most established players of the last couple years, and has done so through a plethora of ways. Here on console, here on the PlayStation, he is just struggling through our first couple of games. Again, it's early on. We're only in game number 2 of 6, so he's got a lot of time to recover from, but as we've stated multiple times, you do not want to put yourself in a position where you're playing catch-up for the remainder of the competition. All it does is set you at a disadvantage that you have to work your way up from, and unfortunately for Byla, that is the position they have put themselves in.
And it's going to be tough to come back from. That's going to be one of those positions of, oh, I need this island to make some things happen. Because, again, remember, 2 island captures equals a win. So you get a win or 2, and you get 2 island captures. It's basically like having 3 wins. And so that will guarantee you the first place spot. Because, remember, we saw how it ended in EU with 0 build. I feel like points are going to be relatively similar because the point structure works the same between 0 build and BR. So 130 to 150 points, probably going to take home first place. And just imagine, you win 3 games, which 30 points each. That's 90 points right there. If you get 20 points average per game after that with eliminations, everything else, you're easily winning. So the capture point, it just shows you how important it really is. But for Treatment now, what's more important is to play the catch-up game and put the feet one after another as they run towards the zone. And Treatment going to have a little bit to work with. You see him going into the back of another tarp there to try to catch that player off, but not going to be able to fully capitalize on it as Treatment just rotates forward. Big plays here being made as they move in. You see him looking around. I love the intel that he's gathering. Head on a swivel, trying to find anybody, but no. Unfortunately, speaking of finding somebody, Blur Antics has been found and unfortunately taken out. Treatment, though, still on the run. Left foot, right foot, running forward. Now, though, could potentially dive into the box. We could see a fight here soon, and as I say that, unfortunately, just immediately disengages. And that's the thing about these moments right now, right? Obviously, positioning is going to be so important, but also you have to look at your inventory and say, hey, I don't have a lot to work with. I'm going to have to jump in.
Especially if you're going to be playing with this type of inventory with 3 weapons on you and not a lot of heals to spare. So, and this is one of these things where you need to be very careful if you are any of these players. We're starting to get down to the nitty-gritty here as we get just outside of Shattered Slabs with our 8th zone approaching. This is where the chaos starts to kind of turn itself up. To be fair, though, we do have a couple of our bigger names kind of going down in quick succession. On top of not only being able to see our last player there go down, we also got to see On1 in that top left feed, Convic in that top left feed. Again, a lot of our bigger names have exited out early here in the second game, so taking a win here would be huge. A lot of our bigger players would not be able to establish themselves. The player that I can really think about that might be still in this one is Revised, and well, Syed also still in this one and having a heck of a game. Revised trying to catch up a little bit with some damage from a distance using the SMG, but gotta do a little bit more. Only a single elimination right now, and despite the fact that he does have those 15 alone is not going to be enough to shoot you up the leaderboards. You need to do a little bit more. You need to survive a decent amount of time and grab an elim here or there, and also not get eliminated yourself. Revised almost drained of his entire health, and it's still not done. 54 total, and he's got shields on him. He's got floppers on him, but does he have enough builds to withstand this? 11 left, and it's only metal, so it should do him some justice, but my goodness, Revised backs up against a wall right now.
Yeah, going to have to survive here, trying to do what they can here in the final moments. This is going to be tough. 11 builds remain. Again, we saw another player in a similar situation immediately getting taken out because they didn't have what they needed to defend themselves. Now, though, Revise is a little bit of a different story. They realize what they're going to need to do in a situation like this, and that is they're going to need to find a refresh. It's going to be important, though, who they find that refresh on as they just gather some intel and take a look, taking a peek here. Interestingly enough, though, I don't know that Revise is going to find much at this point in the game, because remember, we're in Zone 9. Zone 12 is where the obviously the final chaos ensues. Between now and then, until that zone really starts moving, you kind of have to play what you can, right? But now that the zone is kicking in and everybody is moving towards what they can, this is where it's really going to matter. Will Revise be able to stay alive here as he gets infinitely aggressed from around, but distracted is a player showing up out of nowhere. Revise trying to take advantage, but no, it won't work out. They actually exchange there in that moment, and Revise and Dalka go down.
Revise had a chance to take his opponent by surprise, grab the materials, grab their health items, grab everything in their inventory, and unfortunately he choked at the absolute worst of moments, not even being able to slip into the 25. So like we said, Revised might have found himself the Rift POI capture, but that is going to be the bulk of his points walking away from this second game. Again, this is where we say these solos events can really lend itself to chaos. Despite having a good start to the game, the end of it not nearly as sweet as the beginning. Maybe for players like Swexy, they can change that one up. They're still trying to take the high ground kind of aggressively here, though, Panda, and I'm a bit surprised because with only 35 builds, even if you do get to the high ground, there's not much of an option to hold on to it. So, Swexy, you got to have an exit plan here, my friend. You're getting caught between a rock and a hard place as you try to go up high with players firing down. Try to move low into the tarps with other players contesting you. How are you going to survive this one? How are you going to escape, or are you even going to? Down to 19 builds, having to use all of their health items just to stay in this, and now they're getting caught behind the storm. Player pops on them, though, and all of a sudden, from no build to an abundant amount, Swexy probably going to go right back to the high ground.
Big play there for Swexy as he picks up one elimination. He's got 4 in total as of right now. He needs a big finish here to climb up the leaderboard. Remember, a lot of players absent from the top, but Swexy not going to be one of them if he continues to play this out right. He needs to get in, but he unfortunately almost catches himself in the storm. It's the last thing he wants to deal with at this point. So now, playing patiently, he's going to go ahead and figure out what to do next as JB ends up going down there. Looks like JB had the high ground for a little bit, but Stacky ends up cleaning him up. Now Swexy, though, mid-height, not necessarily mid-ground, not necessarily high ground, fighting right there on second height. Hopefully able to do something as players are starting to drop down all around him. Remember, everybody's going to be weak here. Despite them getting eliminations with no Siphon in the game, it makes it very, very difficult to recover. So for these players, they just need to watch their back as Swexy is looking to take some.
Oh, Arsenic not going to be joining the rest of these players in the top 10 here as they're going down. The 8 to go. Swexy still not out of this one yet. Stacky well above the rest. So Daxu was held onto the high ground there after that initial engagement with JB. But they don't have a lot of builds, so they're trying to hold high ground here. But they're kind of struggling to do so, especially considering the builds that they do have are all wood. They got to fire from a distance. They got to find at least a refresh, or maybe they got to find the chaos. Everybody else just fighting on the ground here. The rats continue to swarm. and Stacky's just above them, racking up eliminations, 6 total. Shotgun in hand, they're gonna have to get involved. 2 other players around. Swexy, one of them, but not a lot of health, so the zone will take him out. 1v1 versus Dirty. Swexy gets in, goes for the elimination, can't find the shot. All it's gonna take is 1 in. Oh my gosh, they've been outmaneuvered. Dirty goes high, takes out Stacky, and they lose the high ground at the most inopportune moments, and it costs them the VR.
Yeah. That's insane. Congratulations to Dirty walking away with that win. That was honestly such a clutch there in the final moment. And of course, we gotta say it, man, Stacky, you were using the breacher shotgun pretty well up until that final moment, right? If they had knocked one metal ramp at the bottom, it would have taken that whole structure down, would have put them in a lot better place to take the fight, but unfortunately, they did not take it, as, of course, Dirty walks away with our second game win of the day. Big win there for them, but it just shows you how impactful the action has been throughout these games so far.
And it really goes to show you that every little move that you make is going to cost you in so many different ways. Again, Stacky had some builds to work with at the end there, but they used them to try and get high ground, couldn't hold high ground. As soon as their opponent overtakes it from them, they've got all the advantage in the world. Win condition in their favor, and honestly, we've seen a couple of wins out of this guy in particular. Day's been playing well today, but unfortunately, like many of the other top-level pros that we've had here competing in the PlayStation Cup for North America, they're just not making it that far into these games, Panda. And here at the end, it was 2 players battling it out, but Dirty comes out on top. They are your Victory Royale winner in game number 2.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a great play there from them, but looking at the breakdown here of all of the eliminations, the placements, everything here, it's going to be close, right? Again, Stacky, because of eliminations, almost overtakes the first place spot there in the game, and with those official game standings. Because remember, these are just the game 2 standings. They're not the overall standings, right? This is just showing us who is where after this game. And unfortunately there for Blur Antics to see him on that page is he only ended up getting about 4 points that game.
Same with Byla, though. He's in very close company there. 4 total points for Byla as well. And unfortunately for many other players, including Burt, as you can see, it was not necessarily a second game of comebacks, if you will. Not even for Revised, who was able to find themselves 21 total points in that game, but still only 21, because 15 of those came from just capturing that POI alone. So, Panda, look, EU might have been crazy. NA looking to be almost even crazier. We got big names, and they're barely on the leaderboard right now.
They are, but we won't see exactly where they are on the leaderboard until we go to a quick break. So make sure to stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fortnite PlayStation Cup. Again, Panda and Bass, of course, break it down. 2 games for you, 4 more to go, and the action is just heating up. Of course, a lot of absent names from the top of the leaderboard, but a lot of new names stepping up to the plate. So, Bass, let's break it down.
Well, still in first place is going to be JB. They took the victory royale in game number 1, and that has kept them there. But they are not uncontested. Swexy, we saw them popping off in game 2, and it earned them first place as well. They are currently both tied at 49 points, but they are not far away from the rest of the pack. As you can see, the top 10 all within 20 points of each other, and even outside of that, it is still very close. The big thing to notice, though, only one really prominent name here within our top 10, and that is Convict. They are the only professional player that we can say has really kept up the consistency here tonight.
Yeah, I definitely agree here. A lot of the big names absent from the top, but again, it's only 2 games in. A lot more still yet to play. We'll see if any of these other big names can step up to the plate here in a big way as we go straight into game 3, almost to the halfway mark here. We got to say this, right? These games have not disappointed thus far, and I love seeing some of these newer players or some of these players who haven't had their day in the sunshine get that spotlight.
I love to see it. Again, this is what PlayStation Cups are all about. Some of these players that don't necessarily get to compete in all of these different events, what they do have is a console. They have a PlayStation. They have something to work with, and they can play off of that and prove themselves that if you give them the chance, they'll do incredible things. And, well, about to do incredible things yet again. Game number 3 here. Panda, after this, it'll be the halfway point for the night. So if you don't necessarily start to feel yourself by the end of this one, might be a little too late.
You're absolutely right, but I will say this, with the, I don't want to say lack of points that we've seen in the first 2 games, but the low point threshold here for the top is definitely not only an alarm for me, but also a red flag for the players, because they know now if they can have a big game, they can easily climb back up into it. Remember, we saw earlier with the same format and 0 builds, a player get 50 points in one game. Right now, first and second are 49 and 48 points, and that's after 2 games. So, again, this format applies to everyone. You land off the drop, you get 2 eliminations, right? This is kind of the perfect blend of events that could potentially go your way, right? Then you go for the Rift Island. That's 15 points, right? So, right there, you're at, what is that, 18 points in total? Once you get those 18 points, or actually 19 points, my apologies. 19 points right there. Then you go for the win. That's 30 points, right? So add those together, and what do you have? You have 49 points. Again, that is what first place has right now, but you can get that in one game with 2 eliminations, the capture point, and of course, the win.
I mean, we even saw that come into a huge effect in what I would say was our final game of you there. Again, going into that 131 first place, our second place player in Luis was only at 90 points. They ended up finishing 133, gaining 43 points in a single game. So you don't necessarily need to be able to get that 50-plus point game. You just need to have a good enough game that it puts you back in contention, gets you close, and then you can work from there. Fortunately for Revised, that is not going to happen. 3rd game in a row, we see them exit out early. That has got to be heartbreaking for Revised.
Tough. Honestly, it's really tough to see. Not only for Revised, but for us, man. We went into this hyping this man up. And unfortunately, just not going to be able to capitalize on it, at least in the first half of the games. We'll see what can play out there for the second half. But JB now still in this one, doing a good job of capturing what metal you can find here in Slappy Shores, because, again, it's very, very limited across the map, and we'll see how they can capitalize not only on the metal, but, of course, their entire game and the lead that they have as of now. Even though it's not a significant one, he definitely has that first place spot so far, so keep a close eye on them as these games continue on. But Slappy Shores, while it is the hot drop right now on the map, it is not really an actual hot drop. There is only like 2 players here, maybe 3 players right there looming on the outside, so not too much action going to take place here, because most likely they're just going to split what they can.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, especially for POIs like this, where it's a little bit more wide of POI, a little bit more room to work with. You're not necessarily going to try and take those early fights just because it's not really worth it. Although if I'm being very frank here, I've been surprised at how uncontested some of those POIs have been. You just saw that with Kinjutsu Crossing. There were only 2 players that really were around it, and both of them kind of on the outskirts as well. So players, I think, starting to settle down into that more safe approach. We talked about this earlier, that because this is a solos event, you only get 1 life to work with. You don't necessarily have the ability to play a little bit sloppy, because if you do, that could be the end of your run for a game. And Dolka seems to know that. They're against XYOT. Think that they might just be able to finish the job. Player in front of them, shotgun gonna take him out. That's an early elimination for Dolka. That's gonna do him a lot of big favors.
Big favors indeed, but a big punishment as well, as Dalka was one of those players that we were watching closely, and of course, they ended up fighting Revive, simultaneously eliminating one another. Though this game will be different as they're still in it and Revive is not. But nevertheless, we'll see what Delka can do. Limited inventory as of right now, but it's still very, very early. So this fight is about to take place as this team, or this player, has progressed forward and is looking to get involved.
Happy at this point, just kind of hoping to, I would say, a little bit of safety here up in the north, as it's like they're just outside of Brutal Bastion, and there's a couple other players all around them lurking. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about here. A lot of players just kind of had their eyes on him. My gosh. Really can't escape. He's moving 5 feet and immediately getting drained of literally all of their shields. A little bit difficult here, Panda. I'm not sure what they're supposed to do here, as Rappy has had a really good day so far. 42 points puts them within our top 10, but unfortunately for them, they might be going out first 10 here in our second game. Maybe somebody else is going to go out first. Joe spams you, finding themselves in a 1v1 here against the Ben X, who is kind of on the ropes. One more shot just might be enough to do him in and send him home, and I feel like Joe's doing whatever they can over and over again, breaking down walls. You gotta feel for him at a certain point. The Storm might take out Ben X before they do.
Yeah, you need to be careful here, depending on how this plays out. If Joe at least got 1 shot on him, he'll be fine, but nevertheless, you want to take the elimination for yourself. You don't want to let the Storm take it for you. But also, looking at the zone here, Joe does not have health, which means he either has to disengage or find something to work with, and sure enough, that's exactly what he's going to go for. He's securing himself the med kit, which allows him to guarantee that he can make it into zone, pending he wins this fight with Ben.
That's a very big asterisk being put on this fight right now, especially considering the fact that he's also now just allowed Ben to heal back on up. Dude's at 100 health and 100 shields. He's got actually not 100 health, excuse me, but 100 shields, so he's doing fine. He's doing a little bit better than Vert. Vert, again, another early exit there in the top left, as, again, unfortunately, it feels like so many of our usual professionals are being plagued by the solos game mode that is so unforgiving here, as this... I really expected it to settle down a little bit by the time we got to the halfway point here tonight, as we are about to... Well, not about to conclude, we are starting to conclude our first half of this NA gameplay. Unfortunately, it's really doing no favors for almost anybody. Like you said, low point totals for our front runners through the first 2 games means that this is still up for grabs for everybody. It also means that if you start to mess up from here on out, it's going to be rather costly. So, players, taking this one very carefully. As you can see, Rappy from a distance has now ran out of health, but has a problem. There's Bilo's around him, Convic is around him, a lot of good players who are not going to miss their shot. So, Rappy, 12 builds in a dream. What you got planned here, my friend?
Yeah, I kind of want to know this plan too. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think it's much. I think the only plan you can have is to jump in and hope to get an elimination on someone and get the refresh that they have, because it looks like to me Rappy landed at one of those little off-spawn huts around the snowy area, and then got a couple, like 2, maybe 3 bricks rotating in, and then built himself a box, and that was it.
I don't think that's the play. I'm gonna be real. I don't know if that's the play. I honestly, I can understand it, but I also think the issue is that he keeps trying to make rotations through the snowy north, and is just struggling on reaching as players just have their eyes on him from a distance. And again, it's Convic. They're not going to miss their shots. This is not a player that is just going to let you get away and just be able to escape. He's still firing, and it's requiring every single ounce of build that Rappy has. They don't have much left. 4 total builds. Are they going to get lucky? Is Convict going to turn their eyes away and let them escape? I think they are. The issue is they're running into another player. You got to be kidding. Rappy, your luck right now, my friend. I do not envy it.
I don't either, and especially running into a brick that unfortunately is not breakable, which means the limited material they have is all they're going to have, and that's going to be it as Backtalk ends up taking them out. But another capture point being claimed is Daxthorn claims that one, but Smoxy also in a fight here, running away. We see him in the Frenzy Field area, just trying to build for their life. Can they survive? Oh, almost a solid exchange there, but misses the crucial shot. Remember, again, this player is very aggressive now, but you hit one shot that makes them feel a little bit less confident about their odds, and you're winning the fight.
And we've seen that a lot. A lot of players kind of second-guessing themselves due to just limited resources. My goodness! Smoxy, before I could even highlight why you were playing that well, you're unfortunately sent home. That was out of nowhere. A shotgun shot fell around the map here. That's going to leave us with just underneath 80 players to play. We'll focus on the wrong way here as, gotta say, that last one, definitely the wrong way to play that if you're Smoxy. Not a great engagement from them.
Not at all, and I'm going to be honest, this name is kind of accurate for this player, as I'm not a huge fan of the way they're playing this one out. Playing in the Storm, playing for what is only one med mist, limited resources, right? Isn't maxed out on resources, which is more important at this point in the game. So we'll see if that ends up working out in their favor. If they make it to the end game, then I'm glad that I'm wrong. But otherwise, their name is accurate.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one. Sometimes, sometimes you name yourself just the wrong thing, and it just kind of, wills its way into its existence. I'm not sure what Sovzy would necessarily will their way into existence here. I think they're doing pretty fine right now, though. 100 builds total and a decent inventory on them in a relatively uncontested Mega City, which is a bit surprising. We saw a battle in Mega City earlier today when it was just on the edge of zone, and it's still on the edge of zone here, but nobody really starting to flock to it. Maybe I'm speaking a bit too early, though, as again, only in our third zone. We got a long way to go here, but Blue Josh going to make sure to empty out Mega City of any extra stragglers that he might see as unwanted. Shots from a distance here with the AR are going to at least land a couple of them, but more or less this top of the tower here is all for Blue Josh to work with. So 77 players remaining. We got a long way to go here in our third game, Panda. And again, it feels like players are starting to settle down and find themselves if they're hot for the day or if they're a little bit cold. And unfortunately, for many of the players we expected to come into this one hot, they're about lukewarm.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy for sure. I think that's pretty accurate. And unfortunately for them, they're just not getting their strides. But fortunately for players like Stacky, who realistically has been in the scene for a bit, not necessarily a newcomer per se, but has shown up in a big way, placing in the top 5 as of right now, still finding success in this game too. So they're going to be a name to watch and going to be a contender for first place as Joe spams you. Has been spamming, and we've jumped in with Joe quite a bit on their fights, but it doesn't seem like they've converted those fights into points in a lot of ways. So yeah, we'll be patiently watching how this plays out. But look at the map. Do you see the rift here, folks? That means the island is getting ready to appear, and there are players already stacked up on the rift, ready to go. And of course, there it is. The island has appeared, and now we see, it looks like 4, maybe 5 people fighting for those 15 points.
Yeah, and this is what we kind of expected. Again, it's the same thing that happened to EU. First 2 games, kind of quiet. Finally, Joe spams you, is able to finish off one of his opponents there. We'd seen him in many 1v1 engagements prior, but not being able to take the win. And, I spoke too soon. What is happening here? Amplify. Free cap point. Maybe he was listening to the broadcast and realized what we were talking about. We said last time it took a while for people to recognize that the rift was there. And Amplify, the only one to recognize it, they might get a free cap.
Yeah, but he needs to be careful. You see him kind of edging towards the side there. If he steps out even just a little bit, he could end up losing it for a second. And all it takes is a second less time on that before someone just appears and stops and blocks it for you. So need to be mindful of that as they're just going to continue to play it out. But I can't believe it. That's 15 points to Amplify. There's no way anybody's contesting him quick enough.
Oh, drop it!
Oh! No,
Not in time.
Amplify gets the point, which is 15 points right there. You gotta ask yourself, right? when is it a little too late?
Right? Like, when are people going to start to recognize here? Because, again, we talked about this. Last time it was similar to where, okay, there wasn't really anybody trying to cap the point initially. You know, we saw a little bit of a lull as the island appeared, and we were like, okay, fine. This time, there was a lull, and it just stayed there. Nobody trying to compete there for the Rifted POI, and it's a bit shocking because it's not as if people weren't aware of this. We saw people, tons of people aware in game number 2. Game number 3, it seems like people have just decided they don't want to try and fight, and Amplify gonna get themselves a freebie as Jay falls off of the floating POI, and that's another just extra 2 points for Amplify to take home. They've had a huge game number 3, and I can't believe how easy it's been for them.
This might be the freest points I've ever seen anyone get, like, to be honest. Like, that's 17 points right there for Amplify, and no one challenged them. Like, that's where it comes down to. Like, everybody is in this vicinity. There's easily 20 players right there on the map. Not a single one of them challenged him for the capture point. And fortunately for Amplify, he walks away with it unscathed. Not only that, he gets great loot, 15 points. Unlike Ian, who unfortunately is going to go down at this point in the game. And of course, it's Jaden. We saw them earlier. Now picking up another elimination to add to it. But again, this was an aggressive player, but not one that found themselves in the end game. So we'll have to watch closely if that aggression ends up picking up for them here in the second half. But as of now, it's not looking good, bruv.
I'm gonna be real, I don't know if I've seen really any aggression here in this game. If people aren't aggressing the Rifted POI, I don't know if anybody's aggressing anything at this point. I think everybody kind of just sitting back, kicking their feet up and taking their time. And again, there's so much time left. We are only getting into our 5th zone, and this is the most stacked it's been so far. Last time we got to about the halfway point, and yeah, we definitely still had a decent amount of players remaining, but 71 still around. And again, I think a lot of it is due to where we're having zone pulls right now. This zone pull, not over any direct POI, so this one a little bit more open and free for players to maneuver around. Rotation's going to start to get interesting real soon here, Panda. Feels like we're just on the precipice of starting the chaos.
You gotta love it. The chaos is now ensuing here in this moment. Again, the aggression that we saw from Jaden hasn't worked out in his favor in the first 2 games. Now he's doing it in game 3, and it's causing a lot more people to look in his direction, and that's what you have to avoid, right? Again, when you play this game now, the new way to play here in this season, and it is very, very different. There's different strategies to the way that this game plays, and you cannot be uber aggressive, especially if you're not confident in winning all of those fights. While Jaden may feel confident in the moment, confidence comes multi-layered, as it's not only confidence in your fighting ability, but confident enough to heal back up before another fighter gets in.
Yeah, you really do have to make sure that you believe in yourself beyond compare, because again, it is only yourself that you can believe in. You've got no teammates, you've got no one to back you up, so if you make a mistake and you're not confident about correcting said mistake, it's going to be a problem. Another problem here, damage threshold. Storm Surge officially active yet again, so Sovzy, you're not in a bad spot, but that's your only heals on you. I appreciate you using the med kit now, but my friend, that wasn't the part that was draining from your health. Oh boy, and you're gonna get away with it? 1 single health left, and Sovzy will walk away.
There's no way. Like,
how?
Okay, you know what? Props to you. Like, I'll give it to you. Like, you know what? You deserve that. You clutch that up in that way, then absolutely, you deserve the elimination. You deserve more. Can we just add 5 eliminations there to the total for them? Like, that, what a clutch there in that moment. And another clutch coming through. Wow. Okay, Sin. I see you. I see you.
You're only in the top 70, my friend. You got a little bit more to go before we can start bragging like that. Good thing is, though, this top 70 looking a bit more competitive. Byla actually popping up in the elimination feed in the right way this time. They find themselves an elim, and this is what we got to focus on. A lot of these players probably going to be using this third game as a turning around point. This is where you have to take all of the prep through the first couple of games and really put it together for a solid performance. And again, this is what most of these players are looking for here, is not that end-all be-all performance, not that rocket ship straight to the top of the leaderboard, but at least building blocks, stepping stones to work off with to continue their way up. So I like that. I like that we're starting to see a couple more players get involved here, popping up in that elimination feed, popping up just a little bit more involved in these fights. And, well, fight's absolutely ensuing. It feels like only a couple of seconds ago we were at 77 players remaining, now down to not even 60 around. Stacky's still one of those players. They found their first elimination here in Game 3, and I have a feeling that's not the only elimination they're going to walk away with.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be different here for these players as they just try to survive. And the Stacky in the lobby, he's not going to let you. He's going to take every shot and every elimination with him, and rightfully so, as he is the epitome of a proper aggression, right? Calculated aggression. This man knows what he's doing. He knows how to take these fights at the right times. He knows how to disengage at the right times, and he knows only to take fights when he has the ample amount of resources to take the fight with stride. And that's what makes him so special in this lobby, and that's why he's a top 5 player as of right now. But diving in, he's going to be just trying to end up getting into zone. That's his focus here. But it looks like some players not going to allow it to happen as they begin to pressure him.
He's looking a little bit awkward here, but I got to ask you, I mean, Panda, look, you've been talking about it all day long. Flapjack rifle becoming a big prevalency. He's got a mythic one on him right now. Stacky seemingly taking your loadout, you know, word for word, bar for bar, stealing your flow here. And it's really working for him. He's got 2 elims, and I don't think he's done like we said. I mean, look, this is what we were talking about. This is why you need that Flapjack on you. It is high damage in quick succession, and if you have a shotgun shot just to finish off the job, you can make quick work of your opponent. So, Stacky, taking a little bit of a textbook approach out of what your advice had been earlier. Still does need to survive, though. 50 health, rather precarious position.
It is, and look who it is on his wall. It's actually Aoxy from earlier, playing multi-region cup. You love to see it. Shout out Aoxy, showed up here in NA. But of course, Byla now staying alive, doing what they can here. They do have 1 elimination on the board, like we saw earlier, but Byla is the type of player that they know how to play for positioning, and so that seems to be the focus here for them. However, they need to be mindful of their material. 61 builds is not enough to win this game, so they're going to have to find some soon.
Yeah, they're going to have to find, I would imagine, a refresh off of another player here, because it looks like they are gearing up to try and go for the high ground, as looks like they're a little bit above the rest of their opponents, but can't do that with 61 build. So Byla needs to find at least 1 more elimination, steal the materials of whoever they end up eliminating, and then trying to make their plan go into action. Similarly, I think Day needs a plan right now. Rather barren inventory, no eliminations on him. The weight of the first couple games might be weighing on Day right now, just due to the fact that, again, he hasn't really shown himself up too much. He's been doing better than some of his other compatriots here who have not really been able to show up, but if he wants to be able to truly put himself to the top of this leaderboard, he needs a big game number 3, and he's not finding that here. The player who's been big all day long is Swexy. They find themselves late into game number 3 here as well, with a decent inventory on them, but no eliminations. A little bit different than what the Swexy we had seen before. Can they find themselves at least maybe an elimination here as we get down and into our 9th zone?
Yeah, getting into it though is Piggle. Piggle now just going to try to focus on getting into zone and surviving here on the low ground, but players left, right, and center are going to try and stop him. And sure enough, you see big beams come through, losing almost all their shield, but staying in this one for a moment longer. But the zone now is here. Sousy is here. Swexy, though, going for high ground and actually challenging Convict, and another player appears too. This is going to be a battle for height.
Oh boy, and the battle's starting to ensue here. Convict knows it. They're going to gear up, slap juice in hand. Trying to figure out where exactly are their opponents. Yeah, he saw them run over them, but I think he might have lost track. He's also maybe gauging. Can he just take down all the builds above him real quick? I think not. Swexy, though, great position here, just barely above the rest of the competition. High ground in their favor. They also still need to get a couple more eliminations. Their single elimination so far is not going to be nearly enough to cement them at the top of the leaderboard here overall, despite them being relatively close. That's why they're hunting. Like you said, reach your shotgun in hand. Don't look for any shot from distance here. Pistol in hand too, and oh my goodness, they make quick work of Convict. Not able to finish off the job and get the elimination, but you can see Swexy not missing their shots right now.
Not missing indeed as they continue pressing forward now. Maintaining high ground, Swexy has 60 builds, so a decent amount to work with for now, but it's obviously going to dwindle away quickly, especially with players like Alda Curry right there in the fold. But Swexy now is going to use, oh, here it is, the Breacher shotgun. perfectly as Amplify actually sneaks up from behind. Remember, Amplify also got the checkpoint, so that is 15 points by themselves, and Amplify now challenging for height shows me that they're ready to win this game too.
They're ready to win it, but their inventory is not. Only 25 builds to work with means they gotta be careful here as they try to take the high ground and almost get dropped to their absolute demise. Lucky that it wasn't a bit further of a fall, but going right back to the high ground again. And I don't know if I like this right now because they don't have the builds to waste and they don't really have the positioning either. Convict just underneath them is kind of, I think, rotating out actually. He's not even gonna fight for the high ground. He knows he doesn't have the build to work with that, so he's just gonna let Amplify do it himself. Amplify does pick up a couple of resources, but now he's chasing the tail end of the storm. Not a lot of health to work with and gonna have to be forced away from the high ground. Same with many other players as the feed in the top left lights up. Yomi, Remington, Convict, and Byla all out. Those four not gonna continue here in game number 3.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough end here for a lot of these players, but not for Swexy as he looks to pick up one onto Amplify. Doesn't quite get it, though. Now, though, dropping in could potentially fight this player, but just disengages instead. One build remains. Will Swexy be able to make something happen with it? It's going to be a close call as players like Wavy going down, too, almost instantly after getting Amplify down, as Swexy, though, still in it for elimination, holding on for dear life, looks to turn this around, and builds are no more. He needs to make a play for something. He needs whatever he can find here, unless a player comes to him. We could see it here, and sure enough, a couple players rotating from the backside. Could be a huge sign for him. We'll have to wait and see as there they appear. Can he convert it? No, Swexy is out.
Surprisingly, that is Swexy's worst placement so far. A 3rd place and a 6th place means he's made top 10 every time, but that illustrious victory royale is just out of his grasp. But one of these 5 players, it is not. Silic here, 0 eliminations, 0 builds, barely any items on them. They're just trying to stay in this one as long as they can, and they're not recognizing the storm is taking them out as well. A quick 1-2, and we're down to our last 2. Nick versus Mystics. Mystics firing from a distance, has plenty of ammo, plenty of builds, anything to work with, but all they need is one shot, and the fall damage might do them in from almost 200 down to 15. They need to hit their shot, and they will. Nick not outlasting, and Mystics picks up the victory royale in game number 3.
A great finish there for Mystics, and unfortunate for Nick, but you know what? That's the name of the game, right? You took low ground, you took the chance with it, you almost got the elim, but unfortunately was unable to convert it. So congratulations to Mystics picking up game number 3, and we're officially now at the halfway mark. And of course, you already know, lots of things took place there in game number 3, and it all started with Daxon here getting that elimination and Amplify again, just easily claiming this spot. I still can't get over how easily that 15 points was added to their overall total.
Dude, I really can't understand that. It's about as easy as me winning a foot race against my grandmother. I really don't understand this right now. That should never happen. You should never be able to get 15 points like that. Again, it is half of a VR. You need to be able to play that one just a little bit more carefully. And we did see some players attempt to eventually die, but it was well too late. You need to be more proactive. You need to be like Mystics here, getting in the pig with the muds and being able to dive in and take the fight to them. And as a result, Mystics walking away with a victory royale and the most points coming out of game 3.
But look at that 11th place, right? You see 30 points on the total for Amplify. Again, that is basically a win's worth of points right there for Amplify, all because they got the checkpoint. So definitely keep an eye on them. Convict picking up 9 points there as well. Could be potential for them, but 24th day, Sean, another 7 points added, slowly creeping into what is a potential contention, but not necessarily striding ahead.
No, not striding ahead, and unfortunately for many of our big names here tonight, they haven't exactly done that, but a lot of them are starting to pick up the pieces. Another player I do want to highlight, Batman Booga, finding himself a 6th place in game 2, and not a great performance in game number 3, but this is where it starts to come together. These players who had maybe taken a little while to pick up the pieces are starting to do exactly that, getting some momentum and starting to feel themselves a little bit more. But I still stand by saying, only really big name that we can say that has continually done well here tonight has been Convict. They find themselves 3rd place game 1, doesn't find a good game number 2, but 18th place in game 3 means they are still very much in this one. But the thing is if you're not in this one by this point, it's it's going to start to get a little bit rough. That is the halfway point for the night. From here on out, you got to be on your A game if you even want a chance at cresting that top 10.
Yeah, and it really is going to come down to this. Who is going to be able to claim the most points in these final three and ultimately claim the top spot? $2,500 on the line for first place. A lot of money up for grabs across the board. And again, just for qualifying, you got $100. So definitely going to be paying close attention to what's happening there. But get ready, get set. Game 4 is almost here. But of course, for those at home, you might be wondering, how do I get involved with a PlayStation Cup? Well, don't worry. We got you covered. Compete.playstation.com is where it is at. Make sure to go check out all the information there on multiple titles, games, whatever you want is right there. All the information, of course, how to get involved in these PlayStation Cups for Fortnite and others. Definitely go check it out. Now, I will say this, right? I know this to be true. About a year, I want to say a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, we did a PlayStation Cup. And when we did the PlayStation Cup, we had a player in the chat who had never competed in a PlayStation Cup before. I know them now because they had followed. We'd had some conversations. Now they've competed in PlayStation Cups, and they've actually done well on the NA region. So listen, if you're just on the borderline of thinking about doing it, trust me, take the leap. Compete.playstation.com. Get involved. These PlayStation Cups are an incredible opportunity to showcase you all, the community. So get involved with this one. I can't wait to see which big name is going to climb up the leaderboard through PlayStation Cup next.
Honestly, and on top of that, if you want to know when these PlayStation Cups are happening, if you want to be able to stay up to date on top of that, join the Discord. The Discord is going to be able to give you updates to all of the different competitions going on. So maybe you missed it and you went, oh man, I wish I had a reminder. Crazy thing. The Discord is there to help you out. So again, please do make sure to join up on the Discord, join up on compete.playstation.com, and also make sure to look out for all the other events that we've got going, rolling down below here. And well, speaking of events that are rolling in, we're rolling into game number 4 as well. Again, past the halfway point here for the PlayStation Cup on the night. And as we've said multiple times, if you haven't established yourself by now, this is more or less your last chance to do so. Because game 5 and 6, you can have a miraculous comeback, but if you're too far behind the pack by the time you turn that into that miraculous comeback, I don't know if I like your odds.
Yeah, it might be a little too late, to be honest. But nevertheless, we'll see how it plays out for the remainder of these players as we get into the game. And again, we talked about mobility. We've talked about a lot of cool things coming into the new season. The one thing that's absent from the tournament playlist, and I know a lot of pros are probably happy about this, the Cybertron cannon. Could you imagine if we saw that in the gameplay right now, just destroying builds?
I would be terrified, if I'm being honest right now. We've seen way too many players kind of get a high ground. Imagine just firing Cybertron from, like, the high heavens. I don't think anybody would really be enjoying that. I will say it might have been enjoyable for our viewers and maybe a little bit for us because it would have been chaos abundant. But we already have enough chaos due to the solos game mode here.
Yeah.
Single-player games have made it so much more interesting due to factors we don't know about. So many players taking challenges in ways that are rather unorthodox, and it's working out for them. Other players trying to play a little bit more passively, and it's a bit out of character to what we normally see. So game 4, if you haven't figured out your game plan by now, maybe start to study up a little bit. Read the textbooks, read the notes, and maybe figure it out. Because game 4, just right around the corner. As soon as we hop off the battle bus and into the action, it's the end game here for a lot of these teams. They're going to have to really start to step it up.
That they are. We'll see how they step up here as the games get ready to go. I gotta say this. One thing that has surprised me is the inconsistency of the floating island POI. Not even just competing for the capture point. I'm not even saying just about that, right? Because last season, when there wasn't 15 points on the line, we're seeing similar action as to what we're seeing now, right? I'm also not seeing teams rotate in late and go for the vault. I'm not seeing them go for the house. Like, there's so much loot that's kind of being left because of the focus on the capture point. And I wonder if that loot could have ended up making a difference for some of these players. So realistically, if you're going into the second half with a change in game plan in mind, one of the biggest changes you can make for sure is going for the capture point, even if it's well after the capture point is already done.
I would agree with you on that. It definitely feels like there's a lot of loot that has been missing the multitude of these games, and we've really seen it come into effect at the very end of these games as well. A lot of players with scarcity when it comes to their health items, whether that be shields or direct health items like a med mist, like a med kit, like even bandages. And I know we're not really seeing anybody pick them up, but still very important to at least have some sort of health item on you to work with in those end games, because we've seen too many players pressed up against a box with barely any health and no way to escape it. So be careful. It feels like a lot of players still kind of playing on edge right now, not necessarily focusing and prioritizing their resources as much as they should, and that's shown itself in a plethora of different ways, like we said. But the good thing is, game number 4, chance for them to change that up. Maybe a chance for them to prioritize a different type of gameplay, prioritize a different style, and work with it as we continue on here, because we're dropping into game 4, and already players starting to drop here. Only a handful of them, but it's some familiar names. Evil going down here as we get down to 96.
This is not what I was anticipating there for Evil. Remember, Love Backwards, you already know, has played in several events here recently and has found some success. Again, not top 5 necessarily, but found some success, and unfortunately doesn't seem to be the case there for them. Same thing with Side, who has been one of the players that continually goes for the capture point there in Zone 4. Now down and out, so that's going to be one less player focused and locked in on that. So could be good for players like Dalka, who have tried to go for capture point and hasn't quite gotten it yet, but has always been on the cusp.
I will say that's also going to open up the leaderboard a little bit here. Side coming into this game was in 3rd place overall, so a bit shaky now, because that means that it's rather vulnerable, because again, like we've been talking about, not many players been shooting up the leaderboard all that aggressively. It's been a lot more consistency beyond compare. So for Side to go out early here in game number 4 means that that 3rd place spot is wide open now for one of the other players underneath them who have stayed consistent to maybe overtake. The good thing is that, you know, they've got relatively enough points that they should be able to stay at least somewhat up towards the top of our leaderboard, but you never want to rely on your placements of prior. You want to be able to have that factor, be able to put your stamp on every one of these games, and Side unable to do that here in game 4. The good thing is, though, a lot of other players still around. 93 to go here as we settle into our first zone, and we'll say a lot more off-bus engagements, a lot more off-spawn fights than we were initially anticipating. Usually it's a little bit quiet to start. Not a lot of quiet here, a lot of gunfire more than anything else.
That I can agree with. I definitely think we're seeing a change in the way the players are playing this one out as things continue to change. Ledez actually just tries to escape, but escaping from one player almost led them into another. Fortunately, they were quick to identify where these other players were. Now, though, going to have to try and just loot up where they can, but it looks like somebody else already getting the loot from them. But look at the builds. How have you gotten to this point and have so limited resources, right? Obviously, they did take a little bit of a fight, but I think even before trying to hit the pad, I would have at least tried to get 2, maybe 3 more builds than they had.
At least something? They really had almost nothing on them here.
A wall or 2 even, like.
Yeah, they're still taking fights, too. I feel like if you're in that precarious of position, you don't want to try and engage other opponents and maybe invite more unwanted problems. But look, to each their own. They're doing a good job so far. Ledez here finding themselves all the way in 14th overall. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's working so far. They have found themselves a couple of good games in a row and have kept themselves up here. Another player who's been trying to do exactly that has been Aoxy, who doesn't seem to be in the best of positions right now. They do have a decent amount of build to work with, and they already have an elimination, but they want to try and stay further in this game. Looks like they're going to need another one.
Remember, Aoxy, multi-region player right now. Played on Europe earlier for Zero Build. Played on NA for Standard BR. And that's the beautiful thing of the new setup for the PlayStation Cups, is that it's multiple game modes, which means you can play multiple regions. So, cool little snippet of info for you all at home, but JBC, not necessarily a big fan of that info, as they took a lot of damage here from an unsuspecting player. They were distracted. They're like, Panda, you're telling us too much information here. I got to focus on the game. Not really, though. They can't actually hear us. Nevertheless, though, they can hear us in like 5 minutes.
As we know, all players, though, always have the broadcast on at all moments and are making sure to listen to our notes. That is the main thing that they're listening for. Forget the gameplay, forget the actually focusing. It's they need to hear what we have to say. Obviously,
they just want to hear us like an audio podcast.
Literally, exactly. That's what they're looking for. They're looking to focus on the auditory aspects of this event. And all jokes aside, I'm focusing on whatever is happening to Rappy right here. They are dangling over the water on the edge of this edge of this map, and are still outside the zone. This is a rather interesting fight, and this is even more interesting. What's happening here for Cow?
He didn't say moo.
True.
If he had said moo, I think he won that. I'm gonna be honest, but nevertheless, Cow gonna heal up. I'm surprised this player is just gonna allow them to heal up and actually just completely disengages. A bit of an interesting play there, an interesting thought from them, but nevertheless, sometimes it's just better not to take the fight. But looking at Cal's inventory, if they had pressed that anymore, easily could have walked away the victors of that one, because with only 6 builds remaining, Cal wouldn't have been able to protect himself for much longer.
Especially considering they were floating in the water. It's already difficult to try and maneuver builds while you're in the water, but on top of that, being able to do that with 6 builds is not going to do you any favors, and Swifty, you get no favors either. Blur Antics, a name we haven't spoken about in quite some time. They came out the gate swinging to start our day, but after a couple of poor performances in a row, it's been rather difficult for them to reignite that sort of initial spark that got them going. So maybe that'll be the one. Maybe Blur can get themselves back into this one, because again, first couple games, X amount of eliminations. That third game, they went out in 82nd place with 0 elims. So already a better game number 4 here, but I would like to see a little bit more out of Blur.
Definitely agree there. I think they found some consistency in what they were doing, but not enough to feel happy with the way that the game's playing out in their favor. As Blur definitely is a player that can do more and knows that deep down, so probably one of those things that they're just kind of beating themselves up on right now. However, Breacher shotgun in hand, solid inventory, and it looks like they got 1 elimination here. With that being said, they have everything they need to be successful. Can they do it? We'll just have to wait and see.
And Kanji do it as well. Yes, indeed. They're going to find themselves a quick 1-2 on Haytank and get their elimination, and maybe Sky Tom join them as well. Not exactly sure the opponent on the other end here, as it looks like it's maybe an Acorn name, but are they going to be as good as Acorn? Are they going to be able to live up to that? I don't think so right now. Tom just overtaking them, continually taking the high zone here and just kind of trying to get in their favor. And I don't know, is it going to stay in their favor? Oh my goodness, a shotgun shot barely survives with 28 health to go. And again, continuing to get precarious here. Players start to throw caution to the wind. These 1v1 battles, definitely a little bit more difficult than before.
Very, very risky, of course, for these players, but they're staying alive, so you can't knock them for that. However, though, Viola lighting up the elimination feed there against Treatment, picking up 1. Adam, though, just wants to stay alive. This player is not looking to allow that, though, as he ends up hitting the Mythic Munition Augment there in that moment. It's going to be good for them, as that is a huge advantage to have in the inventory. If you know how to use the pistol, and if you know the value of the pistol, you know why it's so important that Adam is holding that. I bet you, when this fight starts to really ensue, we're actually going to see Adam tank this fight, or take this elimination with the pistol.
I would not be surprised.
You know, that's an example of turning around and shooting.
That is also true. We did warn about this in, I believe, game number 1. My advice was don't disengage a fight if you know you've got the advantage. And unfortunately for Adam, despite having the advantage, they just kind of hightailed it, showed their back to their opponents, and unfortunately the big red target that was painted on it did them no favors. So not exactly going to be able to come to fruition with what you were hoping for, and honestly I was kind of hoping for it as well. I really wanted to kind of up the pistol a little bit because it is one of my favorite weapons in this game, and unfortunately I guess I'll have to highlight that another day.
It's okay. You know what? We're always here. We're always having fun. We can highlight it at some point, but here we go. Blur Antics making his way into the zone. Is going to have some shots coming up from behind. Needs to be really careful of this area, because remember, we talked about it before, but this area is essentially 1 level down from a majority of the map, right? So it's pretty significant advantages if players find themselves up on the icy area or the areas to the left, right, and south. Those areas kind of leave you open, right? The areas that Blur Antics are in, and of course Expert are in, because players can just come up from other POIs like Brutal Bastion and look down and just see you and take some shots. So you have to be mindful of the positioning here, especially for Blur Antics, right? You climb to the top of this building, you're instantly going to become the focus of players around you. So you have to be really, really careful when making those decisions. However, I will say, I know what Blur is doing. They're looking for, if you don't know, chat, they're looking for the new item that has come into those areas. They are actually plants that provide different things for you. You can actually knock them in the direction of other people, pop them for yourself, whatever is most comfortable for you. But you got to be careful. Some of them do damage, some of them don't, and of course some of them give you shield, and that's what Blur is looking for.
Yeah, those shield ones going to be very valuable just to not waste any resources. Like we talked about, health items, shield items have been a scarcity in late game, so being able to stack any of the ones that you do have and hold on to them for as long as you can is extremely valuable. And while we're pretty far away from the late game here with 76 players left and just closing in on our 4th zone, definitely still want to be very, very cautious about not wasting any of them for unnecessary reasons. Especially considering it looks like we might just be coming up on Storm Surge in a second here as well. Players going to have to start racking up that damage if they want to avoid getting struck by the lightning out of nowhere. So, Noah, one of those players I'd have to imagine is not really in a great position here. 75 total health, 2 small shields to work with, but outside of that, nothing else going in their favor, especially with low builds at only 5 total. So, getting a little bit scary, but it's also going to give us a little bit of a reprieve here. Rifted POI officially in here. The floating island going to show itself. Do we actually have people contested this time? Or is Arsenic going to get another freebie? There's no way we're going back-to-back with free POI captures.
It looks like they're getting pressured from somewhere else, but they're not getting directly pressured, which means this should be pretty open for them. But no, Arsenic not prepared for this take. Look at the inventory. Only 30 builds in their inventory. This is not a good sign of them being prepared to take this, because remember, all you have to do is pressure these walls. Like, a player's coming up the zip line right now. All they have to do, pressure some of these walls. They're going to run out of material quick, and it is Revised. And Revised is on the HUD. Also, you see FN Parent landing in too, and that is Nick from the previous game that we saw find their way to the end, but oh, there it is. Of course, Revised gets there just in the nick of time, no pun intended, as he now pressures the wall, tries to take over as much of this as he can. Control is going to be a huge factor for him, as now Arsenic has actually lost both this wall and the ramp underneath him. So if he drops down for whatever reason or gets broken down, like we see there, he could end up getting caught out by Revised. Though Arsenic now, they're playing wall-to-wall, box-to-box, as now they create some separation amongst themselves, but Revised being super careful to watch for the white line. He knows that if he leaves this, even if he leaves it for a moment, Arsenic could end up winning it.
I will say the only advantage he really does have right now is the fact that he does also have CZ, I think, just a little bit above him, or at least to the side. So I think this is not just a one-on-one battle right now. It looks like it's a one-on-one battle here, and I'm happy to see it. I did not want to have a second time in a row where this POI just goes uncontested and it's a free 15 points for whoever happens to get there first. So shout out to Revive for contesting it, and shout out to ZZ for coming in late and still being willing to fight here. He has the guts. This is going to pay off, as, again, we saw this before. It really does sometimes just turn into a stalemate where everybody's kind of just waiting it out, forcing each other to move away, but here comes the really revealing point. 4th zone officially ended, and this time we are not going to see this floating POI. The floating island will not be within the next zone. So now this is cause for concern for all the players here. Who's willing to stick around and just weather the storm? And this is where what you talked about before, Panda, comes into play. Arsenic did not have an inventory for a long fight here. They've only got small pots on them. They've got 0 builds to work with, or maybe at least a little bit of builds, but not nearly enough, 34 total. So it's going to get a little bit scary for all of these players. Who's going to outlast who, and who's going to have the guts to stick around?
It's funny, too, if you looked at the house there, our last game champion from the floating POI, of course, here in the distance, that Abstract there, going to wait and see if they can slip in as well. With all these players fighting, 5 people are located on the island as of now. It does look like some people may be coming up in the air, too, so for all these players. They need to be careful. CZ, though, just trying to get in it. Remember, Revive, look at how close it is to being complete. If Revives or CZ leave, this thing will be going off, and they will lose the point in a second. CZ, though, now actually so weak. Again, Revives needs to be careful. If Arsenic gets this POI for even just a second extra, it is all over.
They can't afford to take any extra damage either. 0 health items on them, no shields, nothing to work with. So Revive's got to take every one of these attacks very carefully. And the question is, now that the zone is closing in on them, the store's overtaken. Yeah, that's the smarter move. Revive wants those 15 points, but he also would prefer to stay in this game a little bit longer. So he's going to have to back out, maybe try to find some health items, which will just give this one to Arsenic. If not for CZ, never mind. CZ backs up by only a couple of feet, and oh, you can even see the anger in them. They immediately start trying to challenge Arsenic, but CZ, my friend, it's a little too late. You've given Arsenic the free points and an elimination. Overstayed their welcome, and it's going to come back to bite them.
CZ, I literally said it multiple times, right? Obviously, they can't hear me like calling out to them and screaming to them like, if you leave this POI, if you leave the capture point even for a second or two, he will be able to get it. That's how close he was when Revive showed up to take the fight. And sure enough, Arsenic gonna walk away with that one. And good on him for being able to be just so consistent. I'm actually surprised Revive didn't wait longer. And of course, it's actually his demise because Revive has gone down there in the feed. So honestly, at this point, he should have just taken the fight.
I would agree with you on that one. Unfortunately, he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Man did not have any inventory or no business really being in that fight there. And honestly, it's better to at least go down with a little bit of a war cry rather than a whimper, and that's not exactly what we found. Arsenic, though, in a great position right now. They found themselves with I believe it was a slurp juice they can use, so now they're just kind of gliding into the zone while still healing up. Although they did stop there, I wasn't sure. Did they make it in, or did we just see them get eliminated? I'm thinking that Arsenic just got absolutely drilled out of the air, and that might have been the only thing that they did this game was get that cap.
And that'll be, in my opinion, a wasted cap, right?
Yep.
Because if they can't capitalize on a big game here, it is 15 points. Yes, it's 15 points to the overall, but it's still not a big enough game for them to really climb the leaderboard in a significant way. So it's going to be tough to see that happen. But Mystic, though, obviously one of our top dogs here on the leaderboard, looking to maintain that top dog status as they go to fight. But Sid also here as well. Big shots landing there, and could be an elimination there for them. But wait, Nick. I was about to say, take the med mist. I don't know if he's going to make it. He does. Wait, he got an elimination at least. I don't know if he took the med mist in time yet. He hasn't hit the elimination feed yet. So that's a good sign. Of course, there he is. Nick going to have to make his way in. As Osid also doing the same. You see the slurp juices popped and ready to go. This is risky. I was about to say, jumping into open waters, no builds, no protection. Definitely a tough spot to find themselves in, and sure enough, doesn't matter. They're going to make their way in, but Nick, it's going to be close. You see, while he does have a second med mist, right? It's going to be a really tight run here to the finish because that zone is not necessarily super close, but fortunately for him, he is going to find his way in. The zone started to set up for the next one. He is going to have to rotate pretty much max distance, but that doesn't bother him. At least he made it in.
And he made it in, and he's still got a little bit of med mist to spare, but that just kind of means that he's got to take each of these engagements carefully, because now's where we start to get into the more hectic parts of these games. We got 47 players to go, and we're down to our 7th zone, and this is where we really start to see those really close combat engagements endure. And on top of that, it's kind of forced here. Storm Surge back in effect yet again, and for players like Nick, they're fine, well above that damage threshold, but for a lot of other players, this is going to be the signal that they got to get going. They got to hustle a little bit if they want to stay further in this game. And that's why you're seeing the Fiend light up in the top left. 3 eliminations back to back to back in quick succession, and Daxthon going down to that Storm Surge as well. Hey, Oxy putting apparently shots on target with absolute authority, drilling that player out of the air, and they'll find their second elimination.
That's a great elimination there for them, but they need to stay consistent. Remember, they are playing multi-region today. That could have a toll on your body, right? Playing, obviously, for a super, super long period of time, you lose a little energy, and if you're not consistent, you can obviously drop down. But Aoxy says, you know what, Panda? I don't care what you have to say. I'm just going to show up in incredible fashion. Of course, 2 eliminations. That's not going to be enough necessarily to climb the leaderboard drastically. It's going to be enough, though, to keep them in the conversation for the top 25.
Top 25 for right now, but we're just getting into our top 30, and it's going to be a top 30 that is not going to include Convic, another player going out somewhat early here. And again, it just kind of feels like we keep getting down to these final zones, and there's maybe 1 or 2 players of extreme prominence around, while everybody else, like we said, the biggest thing about these PlayStation Cups is it's a chance to prove yourself, and so many players here today have been proving themselves time and time again. Steve's not exactly one of those players, but he's got a chance here. Not a lot of builds on him, but a decent enough inventory he might be able to work with. Sovzi in front of them. Gonna try to take the fight. He's just on the low ground here, looking for a way in, and also looking to not get engaged there. A player right next to them, chances for a shot, but they get away without taking any sort of fight. They're still doing that. Shot from a distance. Steve, you gotta make your decision, my friend. You're like half engaging in these fights, half not, and it's gonna come back to bite you. None other than Day with the elimination.
Honestly, that's not the play, right? Like, obvious, you turn around, you're like, oh, maybe this one shot can like convert into elimination. I know that's what their thought process was in that moment, but they were not healthy. They didn't have the right resources to take a fight, so they have to be careful. Yeah, if you're gonna take a shot like that, build behind you, right? Because realistically, all you're doing is like, hey, Day, I'm over here, but I'm gonna run away from you. Come shoot me now. Okay, thanks, bye. Like, that's literally what happened in that moment. So sure enough, Day was able to capitalize on it in a big way. But we'll see how these games continue on. You know, realistically, one thing leads to another. And we can see Day walk away a Game 4 winner. Just a matter of moments.
I will say, Day has probably been the player the most on the uptick right now. Game after game, he has seemingly improved himself, and he's really doing so through a plethora of ways. Day not fragging out here, not trying to rack up elimination after elimination, just playing this carefully, playing this safely, and making sure to get the eliminations where he needs to, and surviving long enough to rack up those placement points. Now, the question is, he can find himself at least a top 10 placement here. He's finding himself a second elimination there. Aoxy's also got 2 elims. He's looking for a third, chasing down your bro, but can he find the final touch here to send him packing? Day gonna send himself packing. The storm gonna take him out as we get down to 13 players around, and I gotta say, that's a little bit of an underwhelming way to see Day exit.
It is, but I love seeing the flapjack rifle used to get in the box, and Aoxy actually going to go down as a mistake. Spent too much time in Storm, but now Cow versus Dirty. Dirty on the high ground, spraying down below. Can continue to pressure these teams away from him and hold the height. 64 builds is quite a bit to work with here if they are careful with it. However, realizing that Cow is still close by, going to continue to look like big shots come through as they get that beautiful, beautiful elimination, but the game is still on. He needs to continue to survive, needs to continue to pressure down below, and ultimately will need a refresh at some point. But nevertheless, Dirty has probably the best loadout in the game right now. Tons of heals to work with. Definitely can heal up if they need to go back into Storm. And fortunately for them, the game is dwindling down. Players getting stuck in Storm, fighting in Storm, all going to drop rapidly here as Rapid actually is one of the final players. Mystic, though, top player in the lobby, could end up getting taken down by Dirty as they are just fighting for it. Mystic has no builds. So for the other teams, it's all a matter of who can survive to the final moment, the final fight. Will we see the exchange? Mystic actually going to play for the heal off. This is risky, though. Remember, Dirty has 3, count it, 3 slurp juices, which is more than enough to win off of the heal off. And sure enough, Mystic now going to have to play for it. Barely any health. All it takes is a few, and there it is. Dirty winning the game. 5 eliminations. Well deserved.
Dirty with a masterclass in high ground there, just playing that to a T. Knows he's got 2 players that are on the rope that are going to have to fight amongst each other no matter what position or rotation that they take. So what does he do? Sit back and wait. Eventually there will be an open shot, and once he's got it with a flapjack, it's lights out. Immediately sending that player packing, and I gotta say, like I said, masterclass, Dirty, well done with the Victory Royale in game number 3.
Yeah, that was definitely a beautiful execution there to win the game. And of course, you know, if you're some of these other players that made it into the last 10, you're like, dang, I could have done more. I could have done this. I could have done that. Don't worry. A top 10 finish is still a very, very solid finish in a standard BR. Remember, this game lasts way longer than in a zero build game because these players are just at a caliber and level of protection that keeps them in it. Of course, Nick, Aoxy, Psycho Kings, all these players are not only showing up here in the final moments, they're showing up consistently through the game, and that's what you have to do. You have to remain consistent, play this one out, and of course, survive to this moment. Be this person and win that game.
So well done. Just so well done. And honestly, him being at the top there for not only eliminations, but on top of that, points, 40 total. Yeah, Dirty Meefs, you absolutely deserve that the entire way through. And I gotta say, this was a rather eventful game, but it was not eventful for one player in particular. We talked about that. I believe it was Arsenic who finds themselves not only an elimination while at the Rifted POI, not only the capture of the Rifted POI, but nothing else. That's all that they were able to get, and it did not feel like enough. Despite in 58th place going out with 18 points, we wanted a little bit more from them, Panda. So again, despite the importance of that Rifted POI, it is not the end-all be-all, as evidenced by game number 4.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and so we'll see how this game continues to play out. I'm excited. 4 games down, 2 games to go. But of course, before we go into those last final 2 games, we have to go to a quick break. Go get yourself some popcorn, go get a snack, drink, whatever you need. We'll be right back with more Fortnite action for you. Here it is, folks. It's the final moments of the Fortnite PlayStation Cup. 2 games remain here in the NA region. Will we see an absolute brawl for the final spot? Well, let's look at the leaderboard and find out, because it's going to be a close race here to the final 2. Remember, we're in the penultimate game now. This is game number 5 that we're getting ready to go into. And so there's only 2 options remaining for these players to climb the leaderboard. And of course, if you're Mystics, you're not feeling too comfortable, right? You might be up at the top spot, right? You might have 97 points, but Dirty right behind you with 2 wins. 85 points. Not too different. Literally a consistent game with a rifted POI, 15 points. Bam, you're ahead. That's all it takes here, folks. So it's going to be a close race to the finish there for the top 2, but Day, of course, not too far behind, right outside the top 20. Amplify Aoxy there, 2 in the top 30. You'll love to see where some of these players are laying.
Yeah, I love what I'm seeing so far, but again, like you said, we have to mention that it still feels like there's a couple of quiet players here who might have shown themselves up a little bit more. Byla and Revise, 2 players to point out here in our top 50. Even just outside of that, Vert, another player to pay attention to. Blur Antics and 6, the second player that we thought was going to do well tonight, just not quite, but we've seen it. In EU, we saw a player get almost 50, I think actually over 50 points within a single game. So if you can do that in EU, so say you can't do that in NA and shoot yourself up the leaderboard, and with 2 games left, you have 2 of those back-to-back, PlayStation Cup is yours.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You really can step up in a big way here. Fortunately for a lot of these teams, it hasn't happened quite yet. And the reason I say fortunately is because if there was a player who has been consistently getting 40-point, 30-point games, this leaderboard wouldn't even be as close as it is, right? So it is still up for grabs here. Of course, you know, top 10, where the most money's at, but it comes down to first. And who will claim the first spot, the top spot here on the leaderboard? Well, let's dive into game number 5 to find out who has what it takes to be the PlayStation Cup champion.
Oh, I'm ready to find out. I hope that all you guys at home are as well. This is going to be a massive game to really determine, is anybody going to be able to run away with this? Or are we still going to have this close battle the whole way through? Buzzing with anticipation at this point. And honestly, we don't have to buzz any longer. It is game 5, officially off the battle bus and into the action. And we know our main players to pay attention to going into this one. Swayze, Mystic, Side not necessarily in this one as much as they were before, but before this game, they were in 3rd place. Meefs, another player, Dirty, that we have to focus on. Convict, another player to focus on. I mean, there's too many players to name at this point. It really is anybody's game here in game number 5.
That it is, and that's why we're going to have to pay close attention to some of our top 5 players. Again, remember, when looking at the leaderboard, it really comes down to just a few points, right? Mystics, obviously, 97 points there up at the top. You saw other players, 2 really, really close. You got 85, 73 for 2nd and 3rd, and obviously Swexy right there in 3rd. Had some decent games before. I believe Swexy had one of the larger games there with 4 eliminations in the 3rd place. So it really comes down to how consistent is the top 3, and who outside of that, like 4th through 7th, like Convict in 7th, can have a big game, would need a 50-point, 60-point game here, and obviously a solid game in the next one to climb into the top spot. That's what makes this interesting, is the format can reward a high-level game if you choose to fight for it. You just have to choose to fight for it, i.e. the floating POI.
Oh, that floating POI, man, it really is so impactful, and I want to see it have even more of an impact on top of that, because it feels like at many moments we were very enthusiastic about it. We were extremely excited to see fights, and some fights have lived up to expectations. Other ones have just been completely uncontested. So I hope players are making a point to focus on that coming into game number 5 here, and maybe some players are focusing on Mystics as well. My goodness, very quickly drained of his health here in Frenzy Fields, and looks like he's opting to disengage entirely. Probably the better idea for the player currently in 1st place. He needs to have at least a solid game 5 to not let this lead get away from him, because we saw what happens if you drop too early in EU. It completely did in our front runner at that point and allowed Lewis to pass. So if you are Mystic, don't let that happen no matter the cost.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You can't go down here. Realistically, Mystic, all they need to do is survive, right? They don't even need to do much more, because you can allow other people to make mistakes there in the top 5, drop down a little bit more points. If you're consistent, as Mystics has been so far, you win this. And it really isn't that difficult for them. But, of course, I say it's not difficult for them. Realistically, in-game, it's tough to get to the final moments. We'll have to wait and see how it plays this out. But no, he doesn't know. Another player right there. This could be doom for Mystics if he's not careful. Fortunately, though, does survive a random onslaught for a moment, and he takes it. But no, immediately gets eliminated from the window. Prodigy cleans him up, and that's going to be our first place player down early in this game.
That is his worst placement by a long shot. He's got to be at least thankful he gets himself the elimination there, but as the only thing to be happy about in that game. Prior to that, Mystic's worst game was 23rd. Not a single placement outside the top 25, and the rest of his placements all top 5. 5th place, 1st place, 2nd place, but now unfortunately an exit before we even get into our first zone. Mystics gotta be kicking himself for that right now.
Yeah, I can only imagine what's going through their head right now, as that was a tough fight to be in. They ended up winning the first one and immediately getting taken out by a player that they probably didn't even realize was there, but that's how it goes sometimes. When you take fights at this point in the game, and obviously Mystic opted to stay in the fight to take it, you have to be mindful of other players potentially rotating around you, and so that's exactly what happens there as Mystic gets taken out. But Revise here in the elimination feed starting to pick up the pace a little bit. Another player we expected a little bit more from, but doesn't mean they can't finish strong, as these games are still going on. Remember, 10 eliminations, 15 eliminations in a game is not impossible for a player like Revise, which could create a huge swing and a huge upswing for them to get back into this.
Yeah, Revise is not too out of it as it stands right now. They haven't necessarily put themselves in the best position possible, but again, not a bad one by any stretch of the imagination either. It really is about making sure that you stay just in between, if you will. Getting those eliminations where you need to and not getting eliminated too early. Popping up in the top left, we just talked about how he was the most prominent name within our top 10, and now unfortunately he's not going to return there. A Convict going down there before our top 80, and again, I don't know what it is. The ends of these games, the ends of the PlayStation Cups just lead themselves to absolute insanity, and this one is no different. We are just getting into our second zone, and already 20 players set home, including Revise. He also pops up in the feed in the top left.
He does too, and this is an interesting set of events. As Stacky right here, who we're watching right now, one of the better players in the NA region, is in the top 15. So, potential to climb the leaderboard is there. However, they need to have a strong finish to the day, because again, this is the penultimate game here, folks. Game number 5, the almost last game of the day, and everything counts here. You cannot make a mistake in game 5 and 6. This is where every little bit counts, especially when you have a player like Dirty, who is clearly getting ready to take the top spot on the leaderboard after Mystic's demise, and is looking to remain consistent.
I'm realizing here, looking at the record for Dirty, it really is all in or nothing. First game, 62nd place, 0 eliminations. Not a great game at all. Second place, or second game, first place, 4 eliminations. Find themselves the victory royale. And then again, 34th place, 1 elimination. Not a good game. And then back to first place, 5 eliminations. It is make or break for this player. This is the very definition of full send, and they might need to be careful. That was actually an exchange on both sides. Both players taking a second to retreat as JB and Dirty just absolutely nailing their shots.
Yeah, it's definitely a risky fight to take at that point, and fortunately for them, they do have the heals to kind of make that exchange and then back up and hopefully survive. But realistically, they're not too far away from one another. It wouldn't take much for them to get into a continued fight, so we'll keep an eye on that, as that could potentially break out here. And realistically, Dirty does have, in my opinion, some advantages. They do have the same amount of heals, right, between the two of them. Dirty does have a better shotgun, which, mind you, most of these fights are going to take place a little bit closer. And JBC only winning in the AR category is not enough for me to just sway the fight in their direction. But more top teams fighting here. That is actually Swexy, who going into this game was in 3rd place, also hunting for the top spot, and they're all fighting in the same place, but not fighting each other yet. This could sway at any moment, so we'll pay close attention to see what happens in this fight next.
Yeah, I have a feeling that if you're not paying close attention here, you're going to get caught off guard. Again, a lot of these fights happening within the blink of an eye, and I don't think Swexy is any exception to that. Yeah, just going for the slurp truck there, maybe just giving a quick refresh and also preventing his opponents from maybe taking that as well. But I don't necessarily like how long they're lurking around Slappy Shores here. Not necessarily forced out of Slappy Shores by any stretch of the imagination, but like you said, a lot of players lurking here, a lot of players that are hungry for those eliminations and want a chance to try and propel themselves up the leaderboard here in Game 5 by any means necessary. So, Swexy, you got pretty much a full inventory at this point, my friend. Might be time to start rotating in the zone and setting yourself up for the long game here. And I think that Dirty's going to do the exact same thing as well. Good inventory on them, tons of heals, tons to work with, and well, one player that has absolutely taken that advice and ran with it is your bro, Ken. Ken, in a good position right now, I believe sitting in 4th place overall, but like we said, with our first place player going down so early, that top 5 is up for grabs for literally anybody within it.
I could agree more. I think realistically, there's so much up for grabs, so many players right here in the fold and in positions to take it all home, and we'll see how Ken can do in a situation like this. Remember, this is one player that has been relatively consistent throughout the day. 68 points is no easy task, of course, for them. Remember, that's roughly in the top 10 and could continue to elevate them as the game continues on. But Swexy, if they have anything to say about it, they can end up stopping the force, and that would be our 2nd and 3rd place teams going into this game. Was going head-to-head for a moment. Unfortunately, looks like they're just going to disengage. Swexy going to focus more on Pickle over there. But, man, that could have been an interesting fight.
It always seems to happen that way, where we just think that we're going to start to get to a little bit of normalcy, and then all of our top players just start fighting each other. I don't know what it is with PlayStation Cups, but that will not be the first time it happens, and it definitely will not be the last one here. But looks like they're going to at least disengage for a moment longer here, as Dirty just kind of picking up the pieces here at Slappy Shores. I'm not sure what they're hunting for, as they have a pretty full inventory, maybe just trying to grab some extra ammo for the road, but my friend, you've got yourself full builds. You've got tons of health to work with. Honestly, at this point, it's about starting to try and make your rotation in and being prepared for the long fight ahead. Although, it's going to be a lot less lengthy than before. 67 players remain, and we're only at our 3rd zone. This game has been going by in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, it just keeps going through as players dropping left and right. Arsenic picking up one there in the feed. Stacky also having an elimination on them. Remember, Stacky is one of those players that could be in contention for a top 5, even a top 3 finish, depending on how these 2 games play out. So we'll pay close attention to them and keep the ball rolling, making their way into Citadel. You know, interestingly enough, this is one of those POIs on the map that I personally avoid at all costs.
Really?
I will rotate far left and far right around the Citadel. The reason is there's a lot of open areas here, especially like the waterways that surround the Citadel. And the Citadel is literally a POI that sits way up in the sky. So every entrance into the Citadel leaves you wide open to get tagged up. And a lot of players, they'll land there and they're like, okay, cool, like I got the high ground, right? But you also have to leave the high ground at some point. And again, with no kinetic blades, no gravity hammers, no ODM gear, no way to really separate yourself away from the POI safely and quickly, you end up having to run across a bridge or swim across water. And guess what? You're just fully exposed.
It makes sense. Honestly, the Citadel is a POI that I feel like has kind of fallen out of favor lately for that exact reason, especially with so many of the weapons that we have right now being able to do damage from a distance and in quick fashion. That flapjack rifle that you've been talking about really is a huge factor in moments like that, where you're just trying to take a leisurely stroll, avoid a POI, avoid a fight, and then all of a sudden, a couple of shots hit you in a row, you're drained of your health, you try and build back on up, and then that flapjack, like you said, just kind of drains all of your balls, using the breach shotgun, whatever it takes to just eliminate any cover that you might have, and then quickly going in for the final elimination. So you don't really want to give yourself even that risk. Moving around is going to make it a bit difficult, but let's see if anybody takes the risk here for the Rifted POI. This time, multiple players dropping quickly. I think they have learned from their past mistakes.
It's funny because this is like a mid-game objective, right? Obviously going for this, but I feel like we're kind of like having every game we have like a halftime show mid-game that we focus in on, and of course it is this island, right, and the players competing for it. So it's kind of cool the way that they've added this and the impact it has on the lobby. we'll have to wait and see, because this is, again, one of the first few events that have used mid-match objectives as a way to get points and separate yourself in the lobby. So we'll see how it continues on throughout the competitive year. But for players like Vanti, they're up there, but they're more interested in that vault, because remember, that vault still provides you with 3 points. While it isn't the full 15, you're still up there, and you're going for something that other players aren't necessarily as focused on. Now, though, once you get that vault, now you can make your play over here to amplify and potentially try to take the fight, or at least cause some havoc for them. Because if you're thinking about the long game, right? You're going up to the top of the house, and you're just raining down pressure from above. That's the focus. And I think a lot of these teams, again, with it being such a new feature, aren't necessarily thinking about that, but it will be the case. Just watch as the games continue on. And there it is, Vanti actually getting closer into the folds. Remember, these swarms not only can damage you, but can damage your builds, and that's what you're seeing happening right now as they hold on for a little bit longer. But another player building up to the heavens just to take some shots on to amplify, and they need to be careful. Again, if you're too far up, you don't count towards the capture point. So keep that in mind too as you fight for it. But there it is. Some of the natives of the capture point all back in full effect. Side is one of them. CZ is one of them. Amplify, one of them. So these players have consistently fought for this, and wow, this is actually the most contestation we've seen on the island thus far.
Yeah, this is absolutely congested all around here. And like you said, Side, a usual face here to the Rifted POI. But the issue for them is that it hasn't exactly worked out in their favor in times past. They've actually been forced off of the Rifted POI and then kind of just had to rotate around, and that poor rotation actually ended up doing them in. So a lot of players here kind of second-guessing themselves when it comes to taking this on, because if you've got 5 to 10 players all fighting for this Rifted POI, the odds of you getting it are less and less likely the more and more players that arrive. So at a certain point, if you're a player like Side, maybe just lurk the edges. Yeah, 15 points is great, but the odds of getting 15 points are rather unlikely. It's a little bit more likely, maybe gaining 6 or 8 points if you can get 3 or 4 eliminations due to just taking the stragglers that are lurking on the outside. So Side trying to go for more of that approach, not necessarily trying to go heads on into taking the POI, but grabbing some eliminations here or there, getting some of the loot, and then just doing enough to give themselves some points to their advantage. Because again, Side doesn't need that big boost in comparison to somebody like Amplify. Amplify sitting at 34 points, they get that 15-point boost. That's huge for them. Side currently sitting in 6th place overall at 56 points, maybe a little bit more now that they're in this game. Doesn't need the 15. They just need to have a good amount of points and continue to climb the leaderboard. So a lot of different strategies being implemented right now, as it looks like everybody is fighting for this Rifted POI. And I do wonder, as soon as the storm starts to close, if we maybe see a couple of players actually have to dip off and kind of just abandon the POI altogether.
Yeah, that's what we're going to see now is the ones that they don't have the heals to maintain this are going to have to leave. Amplify, though, remember the inventory. 4 floppers and 2 slurp juices. Like, this is literally what you need to win this game or win this spot. So these other players, while they'll continue to try and play for it for a little bit, they might try to force a fight here. And I think that's what Ledez is going to try and do here. They're going to quickly realize they don't have what it takes to survive, at least not more than what Amplify has, because Amplify truly has everything you could possibly need to survive for a few zones and more.
Yeah, I don't think Amplify's backing off of this one anytime soon here, and honestly, they're playing this right as well, acting as if they have no heals, not even giving the sound indicator that they are trying to heal back on up to any of the other opponents, and you can hear it. It's just resetting over and over again as Ledez just steps out, steps back in, steps out, steps back in. And so they know that Amplify is still around, and I think they're intentionally doing this to try and figure out if Amplify is sticking by this POI. And unfortunately, Ledez, I don't think you're going to be able to win this one out. Like you said, Amplify stacked up, prepared for this exact moment. And we were wondering when we were looking at EU if players were going to start to strategize winning this POI. We're not even a full second event in, and already we are seeing the strategies in full force.
I couldn't agree more, and great observation there. But Ledez now fully going to have to disengage. That means Amplify is going to be able to pick this one up yet again. But remember, we saw Amplify do this moments ago where they won the spot, but sadly, they ended up losing moments later. And so the 15 points almost went for naught. And so Amplify continually has the strat to win this, but needs to figure out a better way to rotate away, because in the last game we saw them win this spot, they were immediately eliminated on rotations away.
Yeah, you really have to make sure that when you're rotating off this POI, you're doing so carefully. Honestly, the launch pads that all encompass around the edges of it seem like a good idea in retrospect, but they aren't. The reality is that puts a huge target on your back because you're flying through the skies and you're already flying behind the storm. So players are already looking towards the edge of the storm to make sure that they can get some tags here or there, especially with the storm surge being such a prominent factor throughout the day. So, let's see what you got. There's no way they get lucky and they just avoid all the fights, don't they? There's no chance, right? They get to the ground completely unscathed. Panda, this is miraculous for Amplify.
It's decent for now, but remember, look at the builds. 78 builds, not a lot to work with. That's why you see them immediately dive towards the brick, because they need the refresh. So they're going to do what they can here to get back into it. Gathering intel, though, is going to be vital for them as well. It does look like Surge was active for just a moment and quickly an elimination came through, and that's actually Ledez picking up Epic Bros there in the elimination feed. Once was a fighter for the floating POI, now just getting elims where they can. So we'll see how this game continues on, but Stacky ends up going down. Prodigy picks that one up, and that's going to be one of our top 15 dropping relatively early.
Yeah, Stacky not being able to stay too far into this game is not going to do them any favors, especially considering it's not just this game that makes it important. It's the fact that this is your final chance before the final game of the day. You want to put yourself in a good position going into Game 6 to not have to do too much to make it up the leaderboard. We see this many times past. I think one of my more prominent remembrances of this is looking at players like Aimred in collegiate events, where they kind of come into Game 6, you know, they're not in a great position, but they're not in a bad position, so what do? Leave it all out on the field. They just immediately dive into every box, key every player, just try to play as aggressive as possible. And the issue is when you have that type of mentality going into a Game 6, you leave yourself a lot more exposed, a lot more vulnerable than if you had maybe given yourself a little bit more of a safety net to fall back upon going into Game 6. So Stacky, not great that they're going out this early, but they are not probably in the worst position here. Again, we have to mention Mystics going out so early in this game that they're probably going to have to fight to regain their first place title going into Game 6.
Yeah, fight for it indeed, as these players are playing it out. Your bro Ken still in this one. Remember, again, a top contender here for the top 10, and we'll see how they finish this one out, because every point is going to count here with how tight the leaderboard spread is. Of course, the only real separation was in first and second, ahead of third and down, but with first going down early, and I'm unsure of where second lies as of right now, this could be a solid end for them, but we'll have to watch and maintain some kind of understanding of who's still alive here. Of course, you've seen a lot of players already start to drop here in the top 10. More will come as this zone continues on. Day here still present. I love to see it here from him. Can he make something big happen? That's what we'll watch to find out. But also, Yayin, another player in contention for the top 50, just trying to survive.
Just trying to make sure you can stay in this one as long as you can. It's kind of interesting to see the contrast here. We got to zone number 3, and we had like almost 30 players, I want to say, gone at this point. Then in order to get the next 30, we got to go all the way to zone number 8. It has been a rather passive change, and a lot of that I really do have to say is because of that Rifted POI. We saw so many players focusing on the Rifted POI, whether it's actually contesting for it, whether it's lurking on the outside, or waiting for stragglers to drop off of the island and go into a more vulnerable position. Now, all of a sudden, though, we get back to the little bit of chaos here. Quickly, we see players dropping off there. Flew Josh, one of those players. Ledez now going home as well. And like we said, that is really bad. You want to get yourself in the best possible position going into Game 6. And unfortunately for a lot of these players, just looking to make a rotate here into this next zone, they're getting caught off guard and having to retry in the very next game.
So third place confirmed, still in this one, it is Swexy. Now, just looking to stay alive here, doing a great job of gathering whatever intel they can here, but it's going to be a mass play to survive. Breacher comes through, does get some damage, but not enough to convert that into an elimination. If they're careful, though, they can wait methodically, and sure enough, they will. Big play comes in, but they actually drop themselves, not realizing they don't have the full edge there, so not going to be a full elimination for them, but still alive nonetheless.
Yeah, just kind of staying alive is the name of the game right now. Again, these boxes are going to continue to get closer and closer. Your proximity to other players are going to be, oh my goodness, more and more dangerous every single step that you make. And Swexy, unfortunately, feeling the full brunt of it. Multiple shots raining on. And although they've got a good inventory right now, Panda, the big issue was going to be their lack of build. Big issue for Dirty there is their lack of life. going home here at the top 20, and that is a big opening now on our leaderboard.
You love to see it here as Swexy just rotating in by himself. Can he make something happen? Big play, jumps into the box, gets another elimination, and the refresh he so desperately needed in this moment. But he needs to keep going. He needs to keep this momentum. He needs to make sure he stays alive moments longer. Ken, though, also on the front foot, looking to get into zone. Nice little augment play there, potentially to get hype, but no, almost misses it there. Does miss it there, but Curve just below could end up being elimination for him. Swexy also still in this one, is going to opt to drop down. Interestingly enough, he does have a little bit of mats to challenge height, but still chooses to just go down. Better potential down there for him to get a refresh.
It's a very scrappy endgame right now. A lot of scrappy inventories on top of that as well. Swexy, honestly, one of the better inventories we've seen so far here. Tons of ammo to work with. At least 2 heal items on them. Small pots there and also the med mist. The issue is they're starting to run out of builds, and it looks like they want to contest for the high ground here. So if you want to contest for the high ground like this, you got to make sure you use every build to your advantage, and very quickly running out of them. Swexy, I'm not sure what the plan is here, my friend. You're not going to be able to stay here, and with over 2 zones to go, Panda, this is looking very precarious. I'm not sure how Swexy backs themselves out of this position.
Yeah, this one's going to be tough. And of course, it actually goes in their favor. The zone is pulling back across the builds. They just committed, saving Swexy here in this moment. The luckiest I've ever seen as far as zones go. He will be able to hold on at least for a little bit longer. But if anybody looks up in his direction and shoots, he is going to be out.
Oh, 100%. If anybody decides to break one of these singular builds behind him, he's going to just be done and dusted. But nobody does it. Matter of fact, Swexy even breaking the cover around him so he can get a better angle. This is a winner's mentality I have never seen before, but Swexy's job is not done. And the big issue is, remember how we said Day was on his upswing? Yeah, he's on the uppest of swings right now. Top 5 placements, still getting eliminations. Be careful, you still got some ringers lurking below you.
Another big one, of course, is Amplify. We talked about how you can't waste the 15 points from the Rifted POI, and he's not planning to waste it. Staying alive here to the final moments. He does have the shotgun in hand. He's ready to go. He actually could edit this player down, and he does. A nice elimination there, and that's going to be Rapid Boy out here as Swexy dropping down. Could even convert this elimination, and he does. He finishes it with 3 eliminations and the victory royale. A beautiful execution there for Swexy.
Look, I've said it once and I'll say it again. I'd rather be lucky than skillful. And although very skillfully played there at the end was Amplify, Swexy getting the zone to swing back in his favor, we should have known that was him from the very start. If you got that amount of luck on your side, you got a victory royale. Game 5 goes to Swexy.
Huge game for them too, and honestly, that's the progression we want to see from Swexy. Top 3 player, top 5 player for most of it, but top 3 player obviously going into game number 5, and now finishing strong there with that, and that should be a clear bump into first place. Could be close, but in my opinion, that is probably a first place worthy finish, so we'll have to wait and see how the leaderboard pans out. But Amplify, man, oh man, did you prove me wrong. I said, look, the last time you got the Rifted POI, you kind of wasted it. This time, didn't waste it at all. Beautiful finish, second place, multiple eliminations. Good on them to do what they could there in the final moments, but Swexy was just too good.
And the biggest thing about that is that they're also going to actually probably have more points, than Swexy. 48 total. So despite coming in second place, they had more eliminations and were able to get the POI capture. So almost 50 points. This is the 50-point game we were talking about. This might be the start of the comeback here for the night for Amplify.
I think it is. And realistically, again, 48 points, remember, is a lot when you think about who was at the top of the leaderboard, right? Because realistically, I think the top of the leaderboard was like 90-something points, 95 or 87. 48 points easily is half of the points of what the top 2 players had going into that game. So big plays there from Amplify, but we keep it moving as so many teams are playing. Stacky, unfortunately, going down there a little earlier than anticipated. Of course, we also got to say, Byla, my man, what is happening?
if I had the answer for you, I'd probably be a psychic at this point, because I cannot understand at all at this point. My crystal ball is giving me a million answers, and all of them still seem absolutely ridiculous. It feels like only a couple of the players that we came into this one with huge expectations for have really lived up to them. And even at that, they're still struggling here. We talked about it. Convict, he was in our top 10. He finished in 83rd in that game. So the only player right now I can truly say that I think is actually swinging upwards and has an upward trajectory to get to the level at which we are expecting is Day. Top 3 finish there, multiple eliminations. He's looking good. And although he's maybe a little bit too far outside of our top 10 for us to say that he's safe, if he has another big game in game number 6, we could see him rise to prominence here on the leaderboard.
Yeah, listen, Day always has pop-off potential. He's one of the few players in the world that can just show up and like show out in a big way. Again, I'll never forget the days of Reverse Miro Day, where Reverse and Miro would literally just be playing together, rotating in. All of a sudden, they look back, they're like, where's Day? And Day's just 1v3ing trios all across the edge of the map. And that is just the type of player he is. When he shows up in big fashion, and that was a perfect example of it in Game 5.
Job's not done yet, though, because that's only Game 5. We still have Game 6. We've got one last game here for the PlayStation Cup North America. And unfortunately for these players, it really does all come down to this. Sometimes you got a player that's just kind of ran away with it, and, they can sit back, rest on their laurels a little bit, and just let this one go. But not here. Our top 5 heavily contested. Every player is still in this one, and even outside of our top 5, if we can see Amplify get a 50-point game, what's to say you can't get one in Game 6 and rise to prominence?
Absolutely correct. It really depends on how this plays out. But, of course, we have to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. Our top 3, right? As it stands right now, looking pretty solid. But that can shift in a moment, right? The reason I say this and the reason I harp on this so much going into Game 6 is the points are close. Don't get me wrong. They're not like super close, but they're close enough to be a problem. If they go down, similar to what we saw in Game 5 with first place going down almost immediately at the start of the game, here in Game 6, 4th through 10th can clear first place with the Rifted POI, with the vault opening, and with a win with multiple eliminations. So there's a lot of points up for grabs here going into the final game. It's just a matter of which player is willing to come in and take it.
You gotta play it. Risk it for the biscuit, because if you do not, unfortunately, I don't know if you're necessarily walking away a PlayStation Cup champion. Again, we've talked about it. Better safe than sorry has been the strategy the entirety of the night. But if you are one of those players who has been playing safe and it is just not enough to overtake your opponents, you got to switch it up just a little bit. Just do something a tad bit different, and it might be able to give you the advantage, because you need to take any and all advantages you can find here going into Game 6. It is our final game of the day. We went through 6 games in EU with a heartbreaking end. Who's to say we don't get another heartbreaking end here in NA?
Yeah, it's going to be close. We literally saw it, the beginning of the end right there in game number 6 in EU. Right off the rip, 99th place, first place went down, and of course ended up finishing in 2nd. So it can happen. A lot can happen here in this last game that we can't anticipate. But of course, you already know at home, if you want to get involved, you got to check out compete.playstation.com. Lots of opportunities for you all to get involved, not only in PlayStation Cups, but of course, get involved in the community. Because this is a community of people playing games together and playing games against each other in competitions like this. So make sure to go check out all the information there at compete.playstation.com. Now, here's the deal. I think it's time. PlayStation, thank you for bringing us beautiful gameplay, but it is Game 6. And it is time to crown the Fortnite PlayStation Cup champion following this game here in NA. Who will it be? Well, let's find out as this game gets started.
Game number 6, where all the anticipation will finally be answered. Will it be our usual suspects with Swayze, Mystics, and Dirty continually putting up good game after good game here, solid performance after solid performance, or are we going to see the rise of some of the players that we've been saying need to step up? Rapid coming into this game in 8th place, Day coming into this game in 11th place, Convict just outside of our top 15. We've got multiple players who want to prove themselves, and here and now is their last chance. off the battle bus into the action. It's time for Game 6.
And let's, of course, start out with a player that we started off with, and that is Joe Spams You. It was actually one of the first fights we watched on the day, and of course, found some success in early elimination in game number 1. Only right that we finish off the day with Joe.
Is that a day pun, or was that just that happened to happen there? Because we said Day's name too many times now to where it's starting to sound a little bit insane in my head, and I can't really tell what's making a joke about it or what is just me absolutely going insane. But to be fair, it's due to the gameplay we've seen. The insanity continues to ensue here. Chaos every single time that we pay attention to any of our top players, and chaos at Slappy Shores. I don't know what it is. EU, no one cared about Slappy Shores. NA, it is the hottest POI by far.
Yeah, and curiously enough, I will say I have some speculation as to why that is, and I'll get into that in a second. But curiously enough, the spread here at Slappy Shores is interesting and different than EU ever is as well. So little fun facts about that. But do you know who landed here in the first season of this chapter?
Enlighten me.
Acorn and Colt, the FNCS champions, and Booga and Miro. So some of the biggest names in NA, of course, landing Slappy Shores, and of course, you know, you want to be like your favorite players in the world, right? So you see other players follow suit, and realistically, a lot of players have found success from here. Swexy lands here. Dirty, who's in 3rd place, lands here. So you can't knock necessarily the POI for those at home that are curious. You kind of have to understand that something works from here.
Hey, look, if it works for the World Cup champion Booga, what's to say it doesn't work for any of these players here? You want to be like Booga. I think that's the mentality that we've always got. And, well, you don't want to be like Ledez here. Ledez, a player we had talked about time and time again, find themselves in early exit in game number 6. And unfortunately, for all of their various efforts through the 5 prior games, it may be all for naught. That is an unfortunate early exit there for that player.
Yeah, definitely not what they wanted to see. But realistically, still a lot more game yet to play. While it is the final game, it is still going to be a hefty one, as all these players are going to compete in a very, very different way, right? Some of the players out there in the distance that know they are far out of the top 10 are going for every elimination they can find. Players like Swexy, though, as well as Mystics and Dirty, and Amplify, of course, who is also in 4th place, are going to be looking for the win. They know that there's more value in that in just staying alive than there is risking taking unnecessary fights. So we'll see how it plays out.
I wonder if we see any of them even go for the Rifted POI. Because the only thing is that if you do that, yeah, awesome, 15 points. That could be the difference between 1st place and 2nd place if you're able to be one of those top 5 players and get a good placement with that Rifted POI. But the issue is, it's a huge risk. Do you even go for that risk in a scenario like that, or would you rather play it safe and be able to guarantee yourselves, I don't know, a top 20, top 10 finish and get the points from that? So it's going to be interesting to see if we see any of those players even attempt it.
I'm going to say this, right? And we saw it work pretty well for Amplify there. I'm going to say you play for it. But when I say you play for it, you have to play very, very specifically for it, right? You have to max out material across the board before you get there and not use too many resources before you're actually up there. Once you're up there, you need to make sure that you're using metal and brick, and that is it. Because realistically, you need to protect yourself and keep yourself in the storm. And of course, the last point is you have to stack heals. You have to have 4 floppers and med mists and, of course, slurp juices and slap juices. Anything to keep you alive for an extended period of time. If you can do that and have those things, then I believe that's how you win this final game. If you're in the top 3, I would say. Obviously, outside the top 3, it's questionable. I mean, that could work for you as well. But the top 3, top 4, that's the best play to solidify the 1st place spot, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree with you. I think the big question for me is just, do you even take that risk? And I feel like for some players, it absolutely works out. But I think the biggest concern I have is getting off of the Rifted POI. That's where I have concern, because even if you are a good player, even if you are a fantastic player in terms of rotations, if somebody has the idea to go, all right, people are going to absolutely be contesting for this because it's the final game, and they've just got a perfect shot on you, a perfect lineup, there's not much you can do because you're rotating into the zone through a storm that is already ticking, through other players that are already guarding it. So my question comes down to, is it worth even trying for that post-rotation? If you're one of those players that is obviously, you know, going on there early, trying to take the fight, it's not the worst idea. But the problem is that if that fight lasts too long, all of a sudden, that early game, that your, you know, preparation you talked about, can just come back to bite you because you...
All right, here it goes, though. Mystics now doing what he can to survive. Remember, first place going into Game 5, goes down off spawn, now finds himself in second place, down by 10 points from first. So not only going to need to survive, going to need to hope that first place currently, which is, of course, you already know, it is Swexy, goes down. Realistically, it's going to be tough to find how this game could play out for any of these teams. Of course, Dirty in contention too, third place right now, 92 points going into this one. Of course, 92 points still on the board as the game is just really getting started. We'll see if he can make something happen here, though, as so many teams landing. Slappy, Shores, Dirty, of course, one of them. JBC, also a bit of a wild card here in the Slappy area. So, again, if you're Swexy, or if you are Dirty, you're definitely making sure that you're kind of avoiding these fights early on, especially with how some of the fights kind of went earlier. We saw players taking a lot more damage than they needed to and having some unfortunate circumstance, and it really comes down to the final moments as Amplified now going to press in, could potentially get some beams there, actually opting to disengage. Again, the smarter play here. Look at the inventory. Already prepping for the island, which is huge. Medkit and floppers will be a lot, but I don't know if it will be enough. So we'll have to keep a close eye here as this continues on. Now we look ahead. Amplify hitting the augments here. So many new augments in the new season too. Not necessarily seen in full effect quite yet. Lots of shotgun augments though, which I'm loving that this season. But lots of new augments. Hopefully we get to see more in tune with the competitive scene by the time the next PlayStation Cup makes its way around. Nevertheless, though, Swexy staying here, trying to do what he can. Hitting all of the slurp trucks, not allowing for anybody else to get there. I love that play. Definitely a good one from them. Here we have it, though. Mystics could potentially see some success. It really depends on if this player doesn't know he's there, and sure enough, big shot came through. Not enough to make something happen, but a sad, sad end to the day as Byla has now officially gone down and out here in this one. This is not the game that they were anticipating, not the day that they were anticipating having, but listen, we'll see Byla make a bounce back here coming into the rest of the competitive season. But Swexy still on the hunt here. First place, 109 points going into this game. That is no easy feat in itself, especially with the nature of the players that they have been competing alongside, because so many talented players have stepped into the ring here for this one. And sure enough, Swexy finds himself at the top. But realistically, how long can you be up at the top as Dirty potentially taking some shots there? That could have been the biggest disruptor we've seen thus far today, as if Dirty picked up that elimination, that would be obviously our first place player out, and the ability for them to climb would be open. Here we go, though. I'm thinking this could be huge for Dirty as he floats in. Love the slide mechanic, just trying to find their way in. Though Amplify realistically is, again, more focused on the island and focused on trying to play the mid game right. These other teams are focused on fighting and positioning north, so I'm curious if it'll play out, but nevertheless, we'll have to just wait and see.
Gotta wait a little while here, as it just kind of feels like this is a slow crawl to the finish line right now. And honestly, it's not surprising. Like we said, we were going to have two sides of the coin here. The players that were going to dive in aggressively, try and play this one as, you know, in the face of their opponents as they could. And then the other half of it are the players who are going to play this one a little bit more conservative. And we've seen this in so many different events, but the more interesting thing to me is the fact that we really don't have anybody of high prominence outside of an occasional 1 or 2 player that has dropped out. Our entire top 10, as far as I'm aware right now, is still in this game. Usually we get 1 or 2 players that gets upset and goes out early. None of that happening right now, and we're still pretty deep into this. You know, 30 players almost gone home. None of them being our top 10 is rather surprising.
You know, honestly, it really is. Like, I don't know. The whole day has felt like a story or a tale of the unexpected. Nothing has really gone to plan for Mini, and so it just continues to play out that way. I'm curious how this is going to finish. Of course, another tale potentially told as Swexy just fighting for the top spot here. And now is the time. Again, remember where we're at, what we are doing, because you already know Amplify is getting ready to set themselves up for the island as Zone 4 is now here. Swexy is going to be a distance away, so I doubt they're going to try to play for it. But Mystics isn't too far out, so we could see a massive run for it in the top 3.
I'm not going to lie. I don't want it to happen. I will preface this. But it would probably be the funniest thing ever if we talk about all of this with the island, hype it up, and then somebody random drops on it immediately and caps within like 5 seconds. It would be awful, but I'd also love it because it feels so apt, because we've already seen that happen once tonight. Oh my gosh, and it's on one! We barely talked about him, and he's the first one on the island already capping it.
You love to see it, and he actually might be able to get this pretty unscathed. You see Saucy is actually going to opt to go for the vault first. Curve has not necessarily gone up yet.
No way!
There's no way. Remember, it takes 45 seconds to cap the point. And now, being challenged, it is going to be Prodigy. We saw Prodigy fight for this not too long ago as well. And, of course, On1 is actually set up with a nice loadout. Could potentially survive this. Just depends on how effectively they play. Of course, On1, just an absolute unit when it comes to pro play. One of the best we've seen in the NA scene. Great to see them still thriving, but of course, as I say, thriving immediately takes a ton of damage. Now having to play on the back foot and just basically hold on for dear life. Other players now getting involved. This has actually created enough separation for them that he could heal up, but no. Prodigy says, I'm not going to let it happen. I'm wall to wall with you. You're not just going to be able to heal up for free, as now immediately building out. Running low on material is On1. Can he hold on here in this fight? And he doesn't. He is down. That means it's going to reset.
Not only is it going to reset, but it's also most likely going to go to somebody that we weren't expecting. We were wondering, was anybody from our top 10, heck, our top 5, going to try and contest this? The answer looks to be no. Most of the players going after this drifted POI right now are people doing it as sort of a Hail Mary, just sort of tossing it downfield, hoping there's a catch that can propel them up in the leaderboard. Because again, 15 points is half of a VR. You take this and the Victory Royale and a couple eliminations, that is going to throw you so far up the leaderboard, it would be astronomical. So, understandable why these are the players fighting. Also understandable why we are not seeing as many prevalent names fighting for this either. It makes sense. Again, we wondered, was it worth the risk? It seems like to the players, it very much is not.
Probably the right play for sure. Nevertheless, though, Prodigy could walk away with this if Joe or any of these other players just opt to back away. Prodigy does have, of course, the 2 slurp juices. However, that's not a lot to work with, to be fair. It is enough to keep them healthy for a bit, but realistically, depending on how far the zone pulls away, could cause some problems there. That's not enough heals to do too much here, depending on the storm, of course. Now, though, Joe causing some problems as the vault opens there in the near distance. You love that 3 points going to that player, but it really comes down to the 15 points and who that's going to go to. Is so many players fighting for this one. Now, if they slip outside the line as this fight ensues, it could allow Prodigy to slip in and take it, but we'll have to wait and see. You heard the noise. That means somebody went in and out at least once, twice, as that fight continues on, and Prodigy's just hoping that somebody slips either A, into their shot, or B, slips out of the zone so they can ultimately walk away with this one.
They're so close at this point, honestly. Prodigy, I'd say you deserve it, and you think so as well. You take a quick elimination on Joe Spams You, but the only reason you got that is because somebody else apparently started to try and intrude on the fight from behind. But I want to take a second to not actually focus on the fight at hand, but notice the map in the bottom right. Look how many players are just sort of circled around the island, waiting for a fight, looking to see if they can get eliminations from a distance. Speaking of a distance, Swexy, you got a distance to go before you get into the zone, and players in front of you. This is currently one of our top players in this entire event. If I'm not mistaken, I think that they're actually in first overall. So Swexy goes down here before we hit top 60. This could cause huge ripples throughout the entire leaderboard. I don't think the rest of the lobby is going to get that lucky, though. Despite their everlasting wants, I think Swexy should be geared up enough to at least get into the zone and survive for a bit longer.
I will agree. They have the loadout to survive, but it's just a matter of circumstance, because there are a lot of players there on the edge that they're rotating in, so realistically, they can end up getting picked up. But we'll focus now on Mystic, who is in second place going into this, only about 10 points behind first. Could make a run for it. Really depends on how this finishes out, though. So many players still close, still in it, keeping what would be the dream of first place alive. And so we continue to sit this one out as Amplify has kind of gone dark, to be honest. Haven't seen too much from Amplify. Haven't seen too much from, of course, Arsenic, who finds himself in the top 10 going into this one, and Day in 11th going into this one as well. So keep a close eye on these teams as they stay in. And, of course, we call for Amplify, and there he is. He's been sitting in the Storm, opting to go for a bit of a Storm play. I like it, but I don't like the Rift play here. The reason I say that is because it is going to be them rifting straight into the island. I knew it was going to happen.
Oh, no.
Amplify could potentially be going for the double rift. No, actually opts to just go. Nope, there it is. The double rift has come through, but doesn't opt to go back for the island. Fair play, but I don't know. It has been captured, so obviously in Amplify's eyes, it's probably not worth going for it at that point. So smart play on their part, but will they be able to just stay in it? That's the question.
This is a very risky play out of Amplify. Although, to be fair, I will say, Amplify not getting any eliminations so far, or not popping up in the feed at all, is kind of per usual for this player. I went back, checked their stats, because I was like, yeah, I don't really think them to be a fragger. No, they're about as opposite of that as possible. Through 6 games, going into the 6th one, they now only have 6 total eliminations. They are on track to average a single elim per game. So they're very much not focusing on getting those big elimination plays, not focusing on getting in the face of other players, but outlasting. And again, it's also, we have to point out how incredibly valuable that Rifted POI is, because Amplify's placements overall have been kind of up and down. A 55th place, a 71st, a 57th, and then 2 good placements with 11th and 2nd. So it goes to show you that 15 points they earned off of that Rifted POI really has put them in a much better position here at the end of this event than they would have normally. So again, I feel like if you're going to take away anything from this PlayStation Cup, recognize how much this Rifted POI is about to shake up the competitive scene.
You'll love to see it here, but here it is. The strong finish from Amplify as he tries to get elimination. You see him gathering intel here. He knows that if a player crosses his path, he could potentially at least clean up one more of the 6 eliminations that he has for the day, making it 7. But the movement is now, fortunately, Amplify is in zone, so he's not going to need to worry too much about moving. However, lots of players outside of that could have problems here, but Mystic not facing too many of them as they are above the damage threshold. Good to see here for Mystic as they try to fight and vie for the top spot. Curious though, Swexy hasn't gone down in the feed as of yet, from what I've seen. So should still be in this one. And there it is, a close fight to the finish. Swexy 111 points versus, of course, a Mystic who has 101 points. Just a 10-point difference there from the top. If one player goes down even just a minute earlier, it will be all over for them.
This really has been such an intense battle here from our top 10. We just got our first player in the top 10 getting eliminated here, and that was FaZe in 9th place. Goes down, and unfortunately, is probably not even going to be able to hold on to their top 10 as a result. Outside of that, the closest that we've gotten was Nick in 12th place, and then Convict, who I believe was in 16th. So only 3 players from our top 15, actually Side, excuse me, as well, also joining them. Everybody else still around and still fighting for this final game. You can tell these players want it. They know that if they're gonna get the PlayStation Cup champion, they need to do everything perfectly. Don't overextend. Don't underplay. If you get a chance at elimination, take it. But if it is too risky, back off and play for another day. Because with 43 players around and our 8th zone just about to pop, Panda, it's chaos time.
It's time here, folks, as we get into the final moments here of the final game of the day. Will NA step up in a big way? Will we see the top 3 secure? Well, it's time. Dirty now rotating forward. He is going to go ahead and get up on this hill. Does find another player in the box with him, but immediately ends up getting out. Nice play there with the Breacher shotgun. Exactly what they needed to do in that moment, but no. Oh, I thought it was immediately diving into that box, and that could have been crazy, but no, it is. Wait, this is huge here. This could be our top teams competing here for this opportunity. Dirty, though, actually just going to opt to separate. Wow, this is not what I was anticipating in that moment. Of course, they don't know the impact of what that fight could have done, but we do here in the desk.
That could have been huge. The missed shots there at a Dirty. He may not know it, but if he looks back on this VOD, it's going to haunt him for a while. And I will say, it's also probably going to be a haunting memory here for Day. Another one of our top players. We said he was on a surge. We said that he was turning up the heat in every one of these games. Unfortunately, the heat in the kitchen was too much for him to take out there before our top 30, and that eliminates any chance of him for that comeback play to enter into the top 10, as he was just outside of it in 11th place going into this one. So, heartbreaking end there for Day, but hey, to all the Day fans out there, know that your boy gave it his best, and on top of gave it his best, had a heck of a turnaround. He did not start off the day well, but ended it in style. So, not able to find himself the #1 place here in the PlayStation Cup, but we're still trying to figure out who exactly is taking that home anyways. 29 players to go, and feels like at any second, we might see another big name pop up in the feed.
Yeah, we're going to be paying close attention, of course. Swexy, one of them. We need to be careful here as he keeps going on. We say that we know he's in the top spot. We know that he's aggressive, but does he know that he needs to slow down? He only has 12 builds left, less now in this moment. So with only limited resources to use, can he continue to survive, especially with Amplify and Dirty both on its heels? Mystic also still in this one, just trying to make something happen.
I feel like all of these guys are just looking for a little bit of an opening right now, and nobody being able to find it. Again, our top 5 still all in this one. Battling out. Wait a minute. I think I saw Arsenic go down there. Arsenic in 8th place, so it's starting to get a little bit closer. More players from our top 10 starting to drop. The question is who's going to remain? No! It won't be Swexy out in 20th.
This is huge here. If Mystic can get a few eliminations and the win, or even just the win, he'll be able to secure the lead into first place and being claimed the PlayStation Cup champion. But if Dirty has anything to say about it, 101 points is still in contention. So we'll see how they continue to play this out. Breacher shotgun, though, going to be the biggest factor here in this end game. I said yesterday in an event that the Breacher shotgun doesn't have a place in builds. Boy, was I wrong. This thing has been probably the most impactful shotgun here on the day, and I can't wait to see how it plays out with it.
Now, I gotta say, you were also correct on the Flapjack becoming a big factor. It's between that and the pistol right now. People are running the Breacher, running the Flapjack, and just doing a good job at breaking down walls and immediately firing upon afterwards to see if they can get a couple stragglers. One of them is Mystics going down. Our top 2 down and out, meaning the entire play is open for Amplify and Dirty.
and this is going to be close. I don't know what Mystics ended with, but it's not going to be enough there for Amplify. Amplify is out of this one, and that's not going to be enough points to take it, but Dirty is right there. He is just a few points away from claiming the top spot and becoming the PlayStation champion, and that could be enough. We'll see, though, the game continuing on. Top 3 situation here for Dirty. He needs to stay alive. He needs an elimination. He needs something. I believe it's only 1, maybe 2 points away from claiming it. And then it all comes down to this. The drop could have been premature. He needs to be careful. He doesn't have much heals to work with. All it takes is 1 shot, and he could be out of this one, and he is. I don't know if it was enough, Bass.
I have no idea the outcome at this point here. The leaderboard literally neck and neck to the very end. But before we check in on that, let's see who wins the final game. Vinyl versus Evil. You brought up Evil at the beginning of the day. It is only fitting he is here for the very end. But can he cap it off with a victory royale of his own? The answer is no. Vinyl utilizes the high ground, dives on in, and takes the victory royale in game number 6.
Man, what a finish there for Vinyl, of course. Everybody showing up in spectacular fashion in the final moments, of course. That is our 6 games of the PlayStation Cup in a finals. The champion yet to be crowned. It came down to the wire here, folks. It's going to be tough to see who ends up walking away with it. But what a beautiful game to finish the day here, Bass. It is honestly not surprising to me why some of these players ended up here in the finals today.
100%. So many of these players are solos merchants. You can really tell they study this mode. They know how to play it. They are taking every risk, oh so calculated, and took us through a roller coaster of a ride for the end here. I gotta say, we watched 12 games today. We watched 6 in EU, 6 in NA. That is, by far, the best game we have seen all day, and it ends with Vinyl being our last and final winner. Game 1 to JB, Game 2 to Dirty, Game 3 to Mystics, Game 4 to Dirty again. Our only repeat winner through EU or NA. Game 5 to Swexy, and finishing it off with Game 6 on Vinyl. What a performance out of all of those players.
For real. And our top 3 all won games here. But what it comes down to is this. Who will walk away the PlayStation Cup champion for NA? Blur Antics right there in 61st. Not the games I was anticipating from them. Of course, on one as well. Find themselves in 75th. Not necessarily catching their groove. Bila, another one. Top 50 performance, but still not the performance we expected from them. And of course, here it is. We get into the 20th. To the 40th, 21st to 40th, and AOXE climbing in there, double region player. Love to see it. Convict falling out of the top 20 into 23rd. But I think it's time, Bass. Your Fortnite PlayStation Cup NA champion for the standard BR mode today is none other than...
And you hear the drum roll. Can we see it?
Dirty did enough. Sure enough, just climbing over Swexy to be your PlayStation Cup champion for the day. Congratulations, man. But Swexy, Mystic, Amplify, you guys had a beautiful finish in that game.
Fantastic play all around from our top 10. We continue to harp upon it, but it was so close to the very bitter end there. So many of our top 10 players surviving into the ladder circles in that game, the ladder zones, and just outlasting their opponents. But more credit has to be given to Dirty there. Not only did they take first place, they did so while going into that game in third. We made the battle out to be Swexy versus Mystics, and it was Dirty who, well, did us dirty and proved us wrong. They take first place and are your PlayStation Cup champions for North America.
I mean, again, congratulations, Dirty, walking away with it. But of course, we could not do this alone. Without PlayStation allowing us to do all of this, it wouldn't be possible. So big shout out to PlayStation making this happen. And of course, check all the information out on events just like this and more at compete.playstation.com. You know you want to get involved with these. If you want to see your name up on the big screen, us breaking it down here for you, that's the best way to do it. Get involved with what's going on. And of course, you already know. Join the community Discord. That's where you'll find us, communicate with us and amazing players from all across different regions. Joining the PlayStation Tournament Community Discord obviously allows you to find regular updates on these esports events, articles, videos, and meet with others to improve your game. Use the QR code on the screen or the link to get involved. And this isn't it for PlayStation. You saw right there, it said there is multiple things going on here, so let's cover it as we break down the schedule. You already see Dragon Ball Z Fighter Fight Nights here coming up. You got to get involved with those. Those are always super fun to watch. But the big ones I want to talk about here, Bass. Mortal Kombat Ultimate. Not only is it one of my favorite fighting games personally, but it also has a nice little tag underneath it. You see that road to Evo, Bass? You know what that means, right? That means if you place well enough in the Mortal Kombat event, you can actually have an all-expense paid trip to the EVO fighting tournament later this year. Yes, PlayStation will cover your expenses to that, so of course you have to tune in. More information on that, of course, is at compete.playstation.com. Get all the information there. Thank you, though, to the viewers, to the players who competed in today's event. You all made this possible alongside PlayStation, so big shout-outs to you. But Bass, final thoughts on the day. How are you feeling?
Look, we've watched a lot of PlayStation Cups here between the two of us on this channel. This has got to be one of the best ones we have ever seen, if not the very best. Nail-biting end in EU, nail-biting end in NA, and on top of that, I gotta say, NA, you did not hesitate. You pulled out all the stops for our final games there. Truly one of the most climactic endings I've ever seen, on top of some of the best gameplay the PlayStation Cup has been able to provide. And honestly, on top of that, gotta love how it's mostly unnamed players. It's players that are known, but it's not the big dogs just coming in and sweeping up the prize pool like it was when Queasy took home first place. No, no, no. It is the underdog showing that they have got more bite than bark here today. So huge shout out to all of our competitors.
Yes, again, congratulations, of course, to our top 5, to the big winners of the day. And of course, thank you so much for everybody competing and playing along with us. And that is going to be it for us here at the Fortnite PlayStation Cup for both EU Zero Build and NA Standard BR. You'll love to see it. Thank you all. And until next time, we'll see you on the Battle Bus.
PlayStation